are in Baird Country. Okay, welcome to Baird Country. That's what I'm calling this.
All right.
Be careful, you're in Baird Country. We got an awesome guest here today. We have Wyatt Black from season 10 of Alone, and we're going to be talking about survival. Wyatt is a local boy from my area in Ontario, from the Bracebridge area, actually. He's a longtime big game hunter, bush guy, jack of all trades, carpenter or a contractor as well, and a survival expert now, apparently, too.
Yeah.
And anybody that's seen season 10 of Alone, you're going to love watching it because Wyatt was on it. Amazing, amazing season. And I got him here. We're going to be chatting a little bit about survival in the outdoors and all the stuff we love talking about.
That's it. Yeah. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate you having me here.
No problem. So Wyatt, you're telling me this story where it's almost dark out, right? And you're bow hunting, and you're trying to you're bow hunting for bears, not just anything. And it's dark, and you're waiting. It's almost dark. It's legal shooting light, and you're waiting for this specific bear to come in. But you know, there's a lot of bears in the area.
Well, I'd been sitting there that night, and get there, 3-4 hours before dark type thing, and I had a pretty good spot set up, and I knew there was a bunch of bears, and I had this one on camera. He was Siberian, the white patch on the front,
cool.
Pretty distinctive, and just that right size of bear that, I didn't want to take a monster because, I'm certainly not going to shoot a sow with a cub or a sow if I can identify her at all. So, I had this one, and I had him picked out pretty good, about a 250, 300 pound bear. And, anyways, I was sitting there waiting, and in comes a bear, in comes another one, a sow with a 1.5 year old type cub. And all of a sudden I've had 5 bears in around, and just that last, 15 minutes of shooting light type thing. And I could see him coming, very distinctive because of the white chest. And all of a sudden he come into range, and all the other bears, he was obviously pushing and the sows don't want their cubs around any other boar. He came in, and he finally gave me that shot, and I quilled him. I don't know if you've ever heard that death moan a bear makes, but if you've made that perfect shot, they go nowhere. And as they lay, it's just kind of like a wah.
And they're done.
They're done.
Yeah.
So I wait just to be sure, and I climb down, and by the time I'm out of my stand, it's pitch black. I'll tell you, I've been in the bush a long time, and been around bears. I walk into my stand in the dark, baited, all the rest will walk out in the dark. But that night, I just knew those other 5 were all around me within that last 20 minutes, half hour. And I knew the whole time I'm cleaning this bear and I'm getting it ready to take out. It was like I wanted eyes in the back of my head and every noise and everything. I had never been so jumpy in the bush in my whole life.
So you knew there was just a bear over your shoulder.
Everywhere,
literally. Was it a bad bear year that year? Or was it spring or fall?
It was a fall.
It was a fall hunt.
That was back before the spring bear hunt reopened. Yeah,
because I've heard what can happen sometimes when it's a bad bear year and it's the fall and bears are starting to think about hibernation, that they're kind of starved and they'll cannibalize another dead bear. So if you shoot a dead bear, other bears will come in to eat that dead bear.
The one thing about bears in the fall and in the spring, a lot of people don't realize, just like everything else, they're looking for the heaviest fat protein.
Right.
They're all about the fat, and that's why acorns and stuff, they'll bypass so many other foods and stuff. In the spring, all they want's the grass to let their stomach resettle and what have you. You could put rotten meat out and they won't touch it. But there's nothing more fatty than a bear.
Right.
So
maybe a beaver, but not as much fat.
No, and so that's why beaver is one of the best baits for a bear. Like if you've got a beaver carcass, they love it. But exactly what you're saying, they know that all that fat's right there on that other bear. It's like a grizzly and stuff eating a salmon. They'll peel the skin off it and eat the head, and that's it. And the eggs out of it, and they leave the whole carcass. And then the eagles and the other stuff come in and get that, and it's all just part of.
It rots into the ground and fertilizes the wild plants and stuff. That's why with the Frankenstein foods and store-bought strawberries, they added like genes of a salmon to one of them because they grow so much better. Because apparently in BC, all the rotting salmon where there's a salmon run really helps those strawberries grow and become delicious.
Fish emulsion, like when I was a kid, my grandfather would send you down to the creek to spear the suckers or net the suckers, and he'd go and he'd plant one on each end of every row in the garden and one in the middle.
Nice.
You know?
I used, do you ever do any smelting?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So I just got into it and I'm like, why haven't I been doing this all my life? That's me. That's our date night here in the mag.
Right. We call it smelt drinking.
Yeah. Love it. But I ended up getting so much of them. And also they are an invasive species. You're just not allowed to sell them.
Right.
So we ended up using some to fertilize our three sisters' garden. And my corn grew freaking like
better than ever,
way taller than anticipated.
There's actually there's a couple different fish emulsion fertilizers. One's called musky and what have you, and that's all they are is basically a fish emulsion, and they're fabulous. I've got a large garden and stuff, and because I keep bees and whatever, I don't use any pesticides, and all my fertilizers organic and what have you. You know. A lot of that stuff like sting and nettle. I don't know if you're familiar with that stuff.
I am.
You're right. Yeah. So.
Yeah. The first time I'm like, what's happening? You know what I mean? And then I'm like, oh, it's this stinging. It's like the first time you hear a screech owl and you think someone's being murdered.
Yeah.
And then your dad's like, that's just a screech owl, son. Or you know what I mean? And you're like, oh, thank God you told me that.
The hairs right up on your spine.
Yeah, that's how stinging nettle was. I thought like my arm was about to fall off.
Right.
Essentially.
Well, it's a heavy fertilizer, and it grows in very, very fertile soil.
Okay.
And so if you take sting and nettle and you cut it and you put it in a 5-gallon bucket and fill it with water and make a compost tea out of it, it's one of the best natural organic fertilizers you can use for your garden. Same thing if you use the leaves and make a tincture out of vodka or grain alcohol. It's got so many health benefits. It's unreal.
The nettle, eh?
The nettle, yes.
Also, the fibers are so strong you can make a bowstring out of it, which also blows my mind. Yeah,
I didn't know that one.
Just the straight up the twisting mechanism. I didn't know the tincture one either.
Yeah,
you know, you straight up just the twist method. Fold it away, twist, fold it. Oh, was it towards? I don't know. Same way you make cordage,
right?
And it's insanely strong. Like you can, draw a freaking 50-pound bow with it.
That's one of the beauties of like guys like us getting together and with old people and stuff. Like there's so much knowledge out there about the woods and about things that we love to do.
Well, I pretty much know everything. So there's I couldn't agree with you more, man.
And that's kind of how I grew up, was like talking to old trappers and old hunters, and they always had the coolest stories, and they always had the patience. And I was one of those guys that I need to be shown how to do things. You know, you could tell somebody all day long, but they won't get it. That was me. And I had the luxury of having those old fellows that would take me by the hand and show me, and hey kid, this is how you do this. And, you know, and that stuff would stick with me forever, and I love that. And I was pretty blessed to have that. But, having these conversations, it's like the world is an endless book of knowledge, and when we're all in this, it just kind of flows naturally, and I love that about the outdoor community.
Absolutely. I almost feel like thirsty when I'm not learning new stuff,
right?
And that's why I'm so interested in all these kind of areas of survival, of like, me doing my large scale kind of expeditionary whitewater canoe trips, right? It's not really about a canoe. It's about where it'll get you, where it takes you. And I need to learn these survival skills because, you're using them every day to an extent, but if something goes wrong and you're in the middle of nowhere, right? I need to use those too, but then everything else fascinates me. Now I'm, like you're talking about growing food, growing corn, growing vegetables, kind of like being sort of more like self-reliant, keeping that freezer full of healthy meat for your family. It just like, for me, it's just like, it's all of these things, just a lifestyle. And
it's funny. When I was a kid, we'd go down to the garden every night after work or after school, and dad would take you down, or mom would take you down, or grandpa. And we learned, don't pick that. That's the carrots. Don't pick that. That's the beets. These are the weeds, and you learn every row. When my boys were growing up, it was the same thing. We do a certain amount in the garden every night. That's what you got to work to go play hockey, and you got to work to go play baseball. And, but work was also teaching. And they would bring their friends over, and unless the fruit was growing on the plant, none of them would have a clue what was growing, you know, and that's the parents' bad, you know, that's society's bad, where, you know, everybody thinks we just go to the grocery store and get it.
People don't know milk comes from cows.
Exactly.
Right? Or they think you're bad because you're eating a deer, but they're like pounding freaking lamb every night.
Exactly.
They're just eating a baby sheep. Like, you know what I mean?
Right. They don't realize that that a cow was not a domestic animal until we domesticated it, you know, you know, chickens were like a partridge, you know. So
that would be cool if there's like a wild cow season, though. I don't think they exist in the wild anywhere, though.
You know, it's the same. We don't look at eating horses as what they were eating for years, all through. You know, a lot of European countries.
Dogs too, unfortunately. Hate to say it, but you know, it's a lot of. We're probably more cultures ate them than didn't.
Right,
know?
And you know, people don't understand what we're doing to our foods to make it grow more. And I'm going to do a little thing on like all this GMO stuff and whatever. It's all about control. If you look at heritage seeds, heirloom seeds and what have you, if you're growing those seeds, you're able to create seeds that will grow again. With all these GMO'd ones and what have you, they're making it so you can't harvest the seeds to grow other ones. So you're going to have to buy the seeds every year, and you're going to have all of their strains.
Yeah, you can't. I wonder how they would do that with corn. Because corn is the seed. The kernels on the corn are the seed. You know, how do you make corn that you can't regrow?
You basically make it stagnant.
That's crazy.
You know,
That's crazy.
It's like, you know, it's almost like snipping a dog, you know.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what we do with GMO, you know, and it's disgusting, you know, and we're feeding everything to grow so much faster and all the rest of it. Like if people, you know, my buddy and I were raising pigs, and we had these pigs, and they'd come up and they'd run around free, like and they'd come up and they'd scratch you like a dog, and you know, you give them an apple, and they were almost like pets.
And then one day,
exactly, and people would say, "How could you do that?" And I go, "When you look at it, I'm going to eat a pig every year.
Right?
Doesn't matter. So I can either go to the grocery store and I can buy a pig that's walked around in its own feces all day, being cramped in a box that it can hardly turn around in, standing in, you know, eating the same genetically modified crap food. Or I can have a pig that will live twice as long, live a healthy, free lifestyle, and create a better product for my family. Die a humane and quick death, and be treated with respect its whole life. How is that not better? When you're going to eat that pig it's the same as a chicken, you know. And I'm a firm believer that every animal, whether it's on a farm or whether it's in the wild, deserves the same respect, the same as humans. We, you know, you have to treat everything the way we want to be treated. You know, I'm not going to go and leave a beer can in the bush or anything. You know,
me neither.
I used to get so mad. My buddy Aaron and I, we went into Algonquin Park years ago. And it was 4.5 kilometer portage just to put our canoe in the water. We were going into Black Fox Lake. I don't know if you've ever been to that one or not. It's right off the Lake of Two Rivers at the sanitation dump.
I'll go this spring.
Okay, you go into Hiram and White Gull and all those. So anyway,
I usually do a speck trip there every year.
And so that's where we were going. We were going in speckled trout fishing. We get in there, and it's disgusting. Him and I carried out a garbage bag each of other people's garbage, of cans and stuff that were left. And if you can carry it in there full, why the hell can't you carry it out empty? Like, what's wrong with us? You know?
I don't know.
And I shouldn't have to clean up anybody else's mess, but I'd feel bad leaving it there just because I don't want my kids to see that the next time I take them there.
100%. And then it sits there for ages too. I have, so a friend of mine in Moosonee, Logan Jeffries, he's Cree. So he gave me a Cree name after he watches my videos and a few good chats with him. So he gave me a Cree name, which is Winisk, which means groundhog. And I said, that's crazy. I was born on Groundhog Day. My mom used to call me a groundhog. This is cool. He's like, well, the reason we're calling this is because you can never see a groundhog's poop. He's like, you'll never see it. They're the cleanest animals. So because we never see you poop in your YouTube videos, we're calling you Winnis. We're calling you Groundhog. But it's a better metaphor for that. He always sees me leave the land clean.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which was a massive compliment.
Well, and that's, that's a sign of respect.
Yeah.
And, that's what a lot of people don't realize about men like us, women like us, children like us that grow up the way we do. We're taught respect.
Right.
And respect is expected of us, and it becomes to the point where we expect it of ourselves. And that's a beautiful thing. When I went out to Reindeer Lake, I said that to the Cree. Thank you for letting me be here. I will treat your land like my own, and I will leave it the way I found it. And, if we all did that, we wouldn't have those messes to clean up in Algonquin Park.
It would solve a lot of problems.
Sure would.
And Algonquin, after the pandemic, all these people were getting into the outdoors, going in there, deciding, I don't want to carry this. There's garbage left all over the place just because people weren't taught or they didn't think. And it doesn't necessarily make them bad people, but the education, it needs to be out there and people need to kind of think about what they're doing a little bit more.
Right. It's like that old saying, common sense. It ain't that common.
Right.
And,
That's the truth, isn't it?
Yeah. Not everybody's had the luxury of being taught. And, hopefully, one or two lessons and they learn.
Yeah.
And
then you feel bad. Like, oh man, I should have known that. But,
exactly.
Yeah, most of the time. I like to think that in general, some people just don't give a shit though.
No, they don't.
There's that too. But,
and, as a rule, we are the biggest pathogens on this earth.
Yeah.
We're a disgusting species. It's really, in so many ways, I hate being called a human because we are disgusting and it's a shame.
So Wyatt, so I'm listening to survival expert. Now I know you probably wouldn't go out there and call yourself a survival expert.
Not at all.
But when people are watching you and what you pulled off, being able to get food for yourself, we'll talk about that a little bit because, there's a lot I learned from that experience too. But what gave you this skill? Like, how did you get into this? And at what point were you sort of like, this is me. I need more. I have this hunger for outdoor knowledge. I have this hunger to be in the bush. I have a passion for hunting, for feeding myself, for all these kinds of things. Is there a point in your life where that clicked?
I think about birth.
Yeah.
As a kid, I can remember my dad and my grandpa and them packing up to go deer hunting or packing up to go moose hunting. And it was a big deal. Like, we weren't in an area where you could just go out your back door and go deer hunting like I've been blessed to do and what have you. We lived down south and there wasn't a deer around. There wasn't a moose around. There wasn't a bear around. So, they had to travel to go and do that hunt. And I was so envious. And, it was to hear all their stories when they come back and stuff.
Yeah.
It was just a wanting desire as a kid that, like, when I was able to go my first time, I didn't sleep for a week. It was like I was so excited to go.
How old were you?
12. And, it was first year I could get my license and what have you. And it was just, I shot my first moose in 1987,
Wow.
It was, and things like that, I just can't remember when I didn't have that boiling in my veins. When I was like, could walk back to the bush. I can remember my grandpa, my dad and my uncle David, they'd be back in the bush and you could hear the hounds running the white rabbits and you could hear the shotgun snapping off. And my grandfather he had a 225 acre farm just outside of Stayner. And Warren and I, my younger brother, we were barely just big enough to walk and we'd be trucking through the snow. And I can remember my grandfather standing there with a great big smile on his face. And he'd chuckle and give his arm a wave and, come on, you two. And we'd just be, it's funny how life turns around. Because one day I was standing in the field going, come on, old man. And he still had that same big smile on his face. And, I was standing there waiting for him. And, that's how life's supposed to work.
That's your grandpa. Eh?
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting to that point a little bit with my parents are aging too, and the tables sort of turn.
Yeah, my dad, he's what's he going to be? He's going to be 78 here on the 14th of February, and getting a little long in the tooth, but he still gets out there and goes deer hunting and moose hunting and fishing, and
still goes fishing.
Oh yeah, he keeps busy, and he's always been that way, and that. My grandfather, he shot his last deer in when he was 86 years old on December 5th with me, and that was the last day I ever seen him. But he kept going right till the day,
till the end.
Yeah. That's what living's all about.
Yeah, you're giving me goosebumps here, man. It's hard for people that aren't, privileged. I mean, we can call it privilege. It doesn't mean we're privileged with money necessarily, but we're privileged with that lesson taught to us about the outdoors. The memories you make, the bonds that you make with people like your family, the heritage, that tradition. It's so hard for people to understand how much it means to us. You know what I mean? These kind of memories, and it goes back to when you're talking about how you were born this way, right? There's an interesting article, a Nat Geo article, and it's called The Explorer's Gene. Apparently 1 in 9 people have that gene, and they're way more likely to like adventure. They're way more likely to just take calculated risks,
right,
and that kind of stuff. And just from hearing you talk already, I'm like, well, this guy obviously has that. I say the same thing. I said, ever since I was just a tiny kid, I always wanted to be where there was nothing further north than me. You know what I mean? I always want to be in like this wild space, right? And I just think it's got to be something that's born to you. But you also, like you're saying, you had a grandfather, a father that are into that had these amazing times with you that also taught you things, and it makes the learning curve a lot less
even
sharp.
My grandmother, like it's what you. My grandmother taught me how to cook certain things, how to do certain things with certain plants, and what have you. And it's what you're willing to pay attention to, and what you're willing to. How do you want to say it? What you're willing to risk. It doesn't matter what we do as long as it makes you feel full and happy. And I've been blessed by that. And the woods are my thing for that. Being alone, I never thought that I would get the reward of being alone that I did get. I've always been a very social person. My sister and my brother, they'd all tell you that was going to be my downfall, was I'm a social. I got to have people around, and I'm, and I loved it. I want to go back. I really do.
Yeah, you really did, man. And, obviously there's going to be some spoilers in this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
But just the positive attitude that you kind of kept up throughout the thing. I was like, this guy is freaking inspiring. And then, one of the unfortunate things that happens that people don't really see, because they have to condense the end of the show so much, because at that point it's freezing cold. The days are short. You can't go outside. People are much weaker, and there's fewer people left.
Yeah.
So they don't have as many people to jump to, not as much content. Right.
Yeah.
But, I always think that the people watching, they don't really realize how hard those last few days were, and you were positive right to the end. And what I loved about you is you're just like, well, I think I've had about enough of this. You know what I mean? Like, no shame. No, you're just like, it wasn't like read all these, I don't want to say excuses, but we're all prone to try to make excuses for ourselves or find a reason. But you're just like, I think I've had enough of it after 64 freaking days, man. Yep. That's a long time.
It is. And it was, they didn't, it's hard to describe, but I spent 8:43 in the morning is when I had the sun coming up there, and
beautiful.
It was, and you'll notice there was no fire or nothing there, and I shut the camera off and I went for a walk, and I was just thinking, am I really good with leaving? I didn't spend 64 days out there to quit, but I hadn't slept in 4 days. I laid there every night shivering, frozen. I couldn't get full. I couldn't get warm. But my brain was still good.
Yeah.
But I had to be sure. And when I finally tapped, you'll see a great big ring from where I had and I burnt every piece of wood I had. I ate 3 big pieces of fish.
Nice.
And I was just trying, just get warm. Give me a day.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't there.
Right.
And that's when I said, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I was good with it because I knew in my own soul there was nothing more to give.
That's
just
such a positive experience.
It is.
You know, a lot of people would look at that and they'd say, oh man, imagine being second. Well, obviously I'd rather be second than anything else, you know, but except for, you know, maybe
for
first,
winning.
let's be honest, you know,
but that's right.
Not even necessarily. Right.
There's
like if you come first and you're freaking snapped and you're in a basket case, it's just your journey was deep, man. Like it was about the journey that you had. This is what I'm getting from watching the show, which only really can show a snippet of it.
Yep.
But it was your journey. You seem to be just absolutely crushing it. You seem to be really enjoying your time out there. And also you seem to be really good with how your journey kind of came to an end out there, you know?
Very much so.
Yeah.
You know, the Indigenous people out there, they told me that I was not meant to win, that I would not be able to follow the path that I am supposed to follow if I had a won. And that's why Mother Nature treated me as good as she did out there, because I did well. I ate over 150 pounds of fish. I shot 2 pine martens. I shot 9 grouse.
Dude,
I shot
you were
12
just
red squirrels.
sniping with that bow. 9 grouse too,
Yeah.
eh?
You know, the funny part is Mikey shot 19.
Did he?
They only showed.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't capture it well enough or something.
No,
eh?
he did. But they wanted to focus on the rats, you know, and didn't want, you know, they do the show.
They do, They have to turn you into you focus on one sort of characters instead of being all over the place.
Right.
And it's also what they have in the footage too, right?
Exactly.
So,
And you know, and Alan, he shot 5 grouse. He got 22 lake trout or something, you know. But so I also had 10 quarts of berries, 10 pounds of mushrooms, you know. So I figure I ate somewhere in the neighborhood of about 220 pounds of food over those 64 days. That's over 3 pounds of food a day. And I still lost 1.13 pounds a day.
Doesn't that blow your? So that was one of my biggest take homes is how much food we actually eat, right? Without actually realizing it was the first one. And you could probably relate to this after that experience. And also the amount of work it takes to actually procure that food, cook it, preserve it, store it, and actually sit there and eat it. And then how much little time you have left at the end of the day to do all the other things.
Well, that's, that's why I lost those 2 fish.
Yeah.
People don't know the whole story because they show, dumbass goes and puts him in a live well. Didn't you watch Britt lose his fish that way? And I knew that. I talked about it. I said, I know this is wrong. I know this is wrong. We had just spent 80 hours in our shelter with wind that was just unbearable. Like, I mean, the trees were caked right over. Like, it was unbelievable wind. We had straight warnings for 3 days straight, 24 hours, stay in your shelter, don't do any activity coming on our GPS, right?
Yeah.
I had burnt every bit of firewood I had. I had 1 more piece of fish left, and the weather broke. It was the evening. I'm like, I gotta get out of my shelter. So I just get out of my shelter. I go down to my point, take a couple casts, bang, got a trout, bang, got another. I'm okay, this is cool. But it's 70 degrees out. If I hang them in a tree, I'm going to have them full of maggots by morning. If I throw them out on a stringer, I'm going to end up losing them to whatever is going to grab them out there.
Otter,
plus lose
probably.
and that's what I think took them anyway.
No snappers there.
The otter, no snappers, none of that. But I had no firewood, so I was going to have to get I just stayed awake for 80 hours. Like, it wasn't, I'm talking just in my shelter. It was so loud I couldn't even sleep.
Crazy.
So I'm dog tired, but I just had to get out for that walk. Now I've burnt all my firewood, so I thought, you know what? They're going to be fine. They're only 30 yards from my shelter. I'll hear anything, I went out like a light. What I'm sure it was the otters because they left all the scales. They ate them right
Oh,
there.
is they odd? Oh man, they'll get you, man.
Yeah, I
Those
had
otters
5
will
of them
get
on
you,
camera, and
dude.
I knew damn
I'm surprised
well.
the fishing was so good at your spot with the otters even being there.
Oh,
Must be
well,
just
they were
loaded.
traveling all around.
Right,
They were, and there's so many damn fish in that lake.
Yeah,
It's unreal.
just loaded,
And
eh?
it'd be funny because, like Alan and I were talking, they show where he missed 6 in a row. I said, I'm sure it was the same day because I missed 9, and I'm
kidding.
freaking having a meltdown because what are these? And
Was that the day? That wasn't the day you lost your lure. What did you call that one again?
the Gold Hellfire.
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
that was the first one I lost, and oh man, lost hundreds of lures.
That was
in
a
my life.
beautiful lure. How did you make that?
I just carved a piece of. All mine were carved out of driftwood because I wanted them to be so dry that they'd have no. You ever throw like a spruce and then you get that like gasoline type vapor that comes off it because of the pit. You ever drop pit in the water and see the like
right.
So
That's
I didn't want to use anything.
Smart.
I didn't want to use anything fresh.
Yeah.
So I was looking for all the driftwood along the shore. So every lure I carved was out of driftwood, and I just carve a shape of a lure. Mikey Helton, Mikey from the show there. He made me a lure just before we went out that he carved. I still got it at home.
Nice.
And he put the red eyes on it with the berries and what have you. And I was like, and he's like, hey, brother. I said, they won't let me take it, but I'll catch a fish with it when I go home, brother. We were all very good at sharing knowledge out there. Like I taught Ann how to call moose, and the first grouse that Mikey shot was with one of my flu arrows. He'd never seen a flu arrow in his life, and I gave him a bunch of arrows. I took probably 70 arrows with me because I didn't know what all I was gonna. So I wanted to make sure I had forever. Then we're only allowed 10 items, but I probably took 16 or 17 items out.
Right.
You
Just
know,
because you had the other things you're automatically allowed to have, right?
Right. And, just take those. And I'd never seen the train. So I figured, okay, I'll make my last decisions on the couple things when I get out there.
Right.
I might need a shovel. I might need it.
Oh, you brought 16 items to the launch.
Right.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Then you had to pare it down and make that final decision. Yeah, it's a tough decision, isn't it?
Isn't it ever?
Yeah.
And salt. Luke took salt. His dad, one of the best survival act, Larry Dean Olson's one of the pioneers of survival, founder of the Rabbit Stick Festival and all kinds of things, numerous books. Luke took salt. And, that's when
I'd rather have like a water bottle, like a metal water bottle or something. Yeah.
Well, dehydration was the main reason I tapped. I couldn't retain water anymore, and when my body started shutting down, it was because that's why when I pulled that toenail off, I had actually lifted every other toenail hanging by a thread. I could have just pulled them all off that night, like it was just, and that was due.
Was that just because your boots were too tight?
No, it was because of dehydration.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you pushed yourself good, man.
Yeah, and I was great right up till day 55. Things started to go a little bit on
squirrely.
I could see it starting to fade. Yep.
Right.
And I went 21 days without a bowel movement.
Wow.
Yeah. And day 22, I spent 3 hours out in the bush with about -7, -8.
No.
Sleet, rain, snow coming, freezing my nuts
Just
off,
trying to
bent
go,
over a log. And
I remember doing that, something like that myself. And I didn't have my camera on me, but I realized the audio was still hooked up. So I bet somebody's back at the, looking through all the footage, and they just hear me like, making these like death sounds because it was like I was eating these shore crabs, and I was just eating them whole. I ended up giving up on that because it wasn't doing anything,
right?
And it was just like rock hard and like felt like shitting out razor blades or something. It was terrible. It was like a very, very unpleasant experience.
Yeah.
And this poor bastard probably had to listen to it back at the production office, man. Like,
I made sure my camera was off for that episode.
Smart.
It almost made me tap. It was like it was 3.5 hours, literally in excruciating cramp.
Those are
pain.
the moments at that many days in where you're just like, okay, this might be the time,
Yeah, but it's like everything else. You grab a new wind, and I went another 9 days after that. And
9 days, just for people that don't understand, it kind of feels like a month.
Yeah.
At that point,
especially for like sure, Alan and I.
One day is a mission, right?
Yeah, Alan and I were talking about it. Like when it got to the point where there was only it didn't get light till like 8:30 in the morning, and it was dark by 5 o'clock at night again. You were spending so much time in the shelter. Yeah. It took a lot out of you, and it took a lot of mental fortitude to stay out there. I can't. How long were you and your brother out there?
75. Yeah.
75.
So ours was a bit of a different kind of competition than yours was, right? Because we had 2 people, but we also had to start in a completely, like, obviously there's a ton of similarities too, but we had to start in a completely different area. So I had to do this crazy trek to meet my brother, which I think it said it took me 10 days. I thought it was 8. For another guy, it took him 14 days.
Right.
And we just had a compass bearing. So we didn't really know where we were going. We didn't have a map. I didn't know if I was going to find my brother in 10 minutes or in 10 days. Like which is part of the challenge of just, I guess a real survival is like that. A shipwreck. Are you going to get rescued, or are you going to, your bones going to be found?
So you were allowed a compass?
Yeah. So they took it away from us though.
Once you got to your, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So once we got, they took the compass and the hiking period stuff, but I could use a compass, and I was walking through some of the craziest terrain ever. What I did, I took my 2 gators, I put them upside down and tied the ends off. And then I just filled them full of mushrooms. So I just ate freaking cold mushrooms. I boiled them, ate those, woke up in the morning, just ate cold mushrooms out of my hat, just soggy, the odd slug in there, just powered through, found my brother. So there was that trek. So the first 8 days, you're putting out a lot of energy.
So
right in those 8 days,
like a fire for smoke signals. Were you trying?
No, what I did was I essentially just set my bearing off, because I knew my brother was on the coast.
Right.
So I set it off. So I knew when I hit the coast, I could turn right and follow the coast, and I'd find him. And that's what happened. And I heard him chopping wood. And I'm like, Dad, he's a Jim. I'm like, Dad. It was pretty cool, man. But
no doubt.
I guess a question. I've done some trips where I've been alone, completely alone, 36 days. Very, very hard trips, but I have a map. I can make a mental plan. I can say, okay, well, I get hit by blizzards for 9 days, but if I cut my breakfast and dinner rations in half and I travel 20 kilometers a day, I will make it. Not something you can do on a loan, which is a total mind warp, right? What would you think about the alone experience, being actually like by yourself as opposed to being out there with 2 people?
Well, depending on the person you're with, for one, when I talk about doing that stone sheep hunt up in Tottigan Mountain, there's very few people I would do that hunt with. You know, just because you're in such a confined quarter and no other outside influence. So, people get on nerves.
Right. You do. It's true. Like you got to be able to bounce back from it.
Right. Me and my brother, he'd be a great guy. Like his skills are over the top, but we might kill each other. But you know what I mean? Like my buddy Aaron Stone or my cousin Tate, him and I we'd have no trouble.
Right.
So it depends on who you're with. That would really, but you got to have twice as much food.
Yeah.
You know, now there is also 2 guys to get the firewood.
Right.
So
way better.
2
guys.
Right.
That's the other thing they don't show how hard. When I watch you cut 50 pieces of firewood, I'm like, that is extremely exhausting. 60 days in or whatever. Oh my God. But that's
but it also kept the mind and I couldn't be like Juan Pablo there. He laid there and fasted and just did nothing but walk down and get his water and walk back up and go, there's not a chance in hell I can do that. Like I just go,
what am I doing out here?
You may as well stick me in a padded room because that's where I'm going to be going when I get back. But credit to him, he won. He had a plan. He did his plan, and I'll never take anything away from him. It's the same. I come back and certain people talk about my arm injury.
Right.
How many calories that burnt and what if? And I said, I'll never use that as an excuse. That is part of the game. That is part of the competition. It was my mistake that caused that injury. I'm lucky it didn't take me out instantly.
Do you think your background as a hockey player helped you tough through the stab in your arm there?
My background as a hockey player, it makes you endure a lot.
It really does. Like cuts are like nothing. If you play hockey, you're average person, you're bleeding. Like you don't even notice it. And then someone's like, you're bleeding, man. You're like, oh yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? Like it does help.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I remember my son Andrew there one time, and like he was a totally different kid when he put a hockey helmet on. Like you wouldn't even recognize the kid on the ice. It's the same kid that was going to the schoolyard, and he missed a shift. I'd seen him take a dirty smack and go down and what have you, and he goes over to the bench and he missed his next shift, and that's not like him, you know. And then he missed the next one. He's still sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
I went around and hey, bud, what's going on? He says, my shoulder, Dad. And I give him a little, you broke your collarbone.
Collarbone, yeah.
And let's go.
Yeah.
We went
Didn't
to the
even want to
hospital.
miss, didn't
He
you?
had fractured his shoulder blade, his scapula.
Yeah.
And, you know, he sat on the bench for 2 shifts because he's a tough little bastard.
Yeah,
and, you know, I want to go back out on the ice. And that's what hockey does to you. You know, you see all those clips like with soccer players and stuff and and hockey players pretending they're not hurt.
Right. Yeah. It's like the polar freaking opposite.
Yeah.
No, I feel like that helps you just deal with like little bits of pain here and there that doesn't make a difference. And also just kind of being in the bush as well does too, right? Like some people would have just been like, oh, I'm injured and gotten out of there. And probably if they had seen the injury, the production crew, they might have made it way more big of a deal about it than it was.
Time.
You know what I mean?
And it was like, you know,
at least to what me and you would consider.
Yeah,
a big
like
deal.
I could hit that wall. Like if I went like that, I could squirt that wall with pus for 3 or 4 days. It was just like nasty.
You should have just sat there and squirted it at the camera.
It was. And I'll tell you though, like when I pulled that final piece out, that was day 14. Yeah. That was 3/4 of an inch, and I only had 2. That means that one that went in there was 1.5 inches into my forearm. You know, and that's quite an impalement.
That's
like it took 14 days for that last 3/4 to work its way out. It was just like an orgasm when I pulled it. It was, you know,
that's wild, man.
Yeah,
that's
but, you know, those things. A lot of that had to do with my dad and my grandpa because going hunting white rabbits and going ice fishing and stuff. I was like 3, 4, 5 years old, and they're grown men. And if you can't suck it up and stay there, you're not going next time.
Right.
So you don't complain about it. Your feet are frozen. You're soaking wet. Your gloves, you know, back then we had wool mitts and all the rest of it. And you're like stuck there with your arms. But you never complained because if you did, you didn't go next time.
So I think you just touched on what is, in my mind, the best survival skill, which is not giving a fuck, basically.
That's right.
Learning how you can watch, you can read every survival book, you can watch every YouTube video, you can take all the training courses, but it takes experience to get out there and get used to getting bit by mosquitoes, to get used to just being cold and wet to the point where you don't care. I remember getting a soaker as a kid. I'm like, I have a soaker. Like, do you care now at all? It's like nothing. It's the same sort of thing. And unless you have that real bush time, you know, and I feel like that's a lot of the people that have done really well on the show is people that have just had bush time, regardless of what sort of background in the outdoors they have. It's just they've spent a lot of time in the bush, you know.
Now, are you or Dan older?
Me or Ted, my brother.
Or Ted, sorry.
Ted, I'm older.
You're older.
A little
so
funnier, smarter.
So Ted would be the youngest guy that's probably ever won alone, wouldn't he?
Gee, you know, that's probably true because I think he was 29 or 30 at the time.
Like, as a rule, young people don't win.
Right.
They don't have the mental fortitude.
Right.
And I'd really like to know how much of that part was having someone there enabled you to have the mental fortitude.
Yeah.
Because there was a kid, I think his name was Josh or something. He was from Alaska or something on a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I think it might have been the Labrador season.
Right.
And the kid was crushing it. He was shooting all kinds of grouse, shooting all kinds of red squirrels.
Yeah.
And then one day he just said, I miss my girlfriend and my dog and I want to go home. And there was no other, like, it was not due to hardships that he was going home. I think it was all just due to his brain. And that's what I know what the mental fortitude was like out there. And the more mature people are, I think the better chance they have of dealing with that.
Yeah. So maybe being old, or maybe, you know, that's just what we say because we're old guys and we want to give ourselves some credit, you know what I mean?
Maybe, but really. The proof's in the pudding.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, man. I think one of the things I noticed too, it's like you're talking about being out there with 2 people, injuries. I put an axe through the back of my hand.
Right.
I could stop the bleeding. It was on a pack. I threw the pack off. I put my hand on a rock ledge, pushed the top pack off, and the bit of the axe, the sheath had come out. It's one of those Husqvarna axes with just it only covered the end. Bam, right into my hand. I was up north of Lake Superior, freaking hole this big in my freaking hand, man. It was like, look real. Like I showed
Yeah.
my brother, I'm like, look, he's like, whoa, I'm like, dude, hold it in a little, right?
Yeah.
I was able to help, but he was able to pull out bandage. But I'm like, man, if that was in a spot I couldn't reach and I was by myself, it would be an issue. But you look at Sam and Pete, who came in second place, right?
Yeah.
I'm sitting there and I'm watching freaking Pete catch fish. Sam didn't catch one fish. Pete caught like 45 fish the whole time. And I'm sitting there watching like the final episode with like my mom's friend, who's kind of like this like city person with a Bichon frise and drinks like with one finger sticking out. And she's like, well, I think it's because he has an olive green rain jacket and the other guy has blaze orange. I'm like, oh my God, she's totally right. I never even caught that. Well, guess what? If Pete was up by himself, if he could handle it mentally, he would have probably beat my brother and I because he had more food, right? And the Army always trains survival in groups, but that's more like short term, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, and one of the things you probably notice too is that it doesn't matter if you're freaking Rambo. It doesn't matter if you're the best survivalist ever. You cannot manifest calories that can be harvested no matter how good you are.
And
you know,
and the fact, like, you take I forget the guy's name, I think it was season 2, dude from the US military, scared shitless of bears,
right?
And he didn't even make the first night.
Yeah, like he'd probably do great if people were shooting at him. He probably would have won,
right?
But you know what I mean? Different sport, you know.
Or if you just have somebody with you, or if you have a gun, you know,
that would,
you don't give all these guys a gun and they change their whole mental. Give them a sharp stick and a string and see how they do.
Right.
You know, people say, "Were you scared of bears and wolves?" I'm like, no, I didn't put a door on either one of my ends of my shelters for the first 2 weeks. You know, I watched the sun come up there and I watched the sun go down there and just lay there. You know,
oh, those are the glory days,
right?
Man. You had some. I was like, oh, that weather looks so nice.
Some of it was.
Yeah, and then
well, as soon as those geese started flying, we were all filming the geese and we're talking. Like, it was just day after day after day, and as soon as that wind started heading out of the Arctic, the geese just jumped on the train and they were getting the hell out of there. Yeah, and they were a long ways above us. You know.
And then things got crazy.
Yeah, October 4th was our first snowfall. They dropped us off September 15th, so we were there 19 days when it snowed. The 4 days previous to that, my water had froze, a skim on every
I remember
night.
you saying, oh, it's almost a Remembrance Day. I'm like, this isn't even past deer season where I'm from. And I was thinking it was like freaking late December or some shit there almost, eh? Like it's north. I've been up in that country before. No, there isn't really a lot of game there, by the way.
No.
There's not a lot of moose there, and there's woodland caribou,
which
the migratory,
which
you weren't allowed to shoot, and then the migratory caribou, which all got killed off in the fur trade area. Why it's called Reindeer Lake, because they were harvesting those out of Brochet to feed the voyageurs and the Orkney men and York boats after they wiped out the bison. But there still are probably barren land caribou that come down there. But we're talking about when the lakes froze and in the winter.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So there's not a ton of big game in that area, man.
No, and there's like Luke had those bears.
Yeah,
and like Alan or Cade.
Yeah, there's bears. There's a decent population of bears, but like that's it.
And the moose population decent in areas.
Is it? Yeah.
And the natives I was talking to said where I was more of a wintering area, and I knew that. I figured that out. I called moose every night that was calm, every morning that was calm. I walked every point around my area. And there were some spots, man, I've called moose ever since I can remember. And I called just singing down the lake. And I'm just waiting. I'm figuring for sure. That was my whole game plan, was to shoot a moose up there. And
obviously.
Yeah, and Christ, to tell me that I could go there and not call, I just couldn't believe it. But
were you were definitely in the rut. What time of year did you get in?
September 15th was our drop date. Perfect time. And it was just Ann and I, we were at camp. We both got up in the morning. We were out having a leak at the same time. It's still dark. Everyone else is in there, and I said, looks like we got the same biological alarm there, Ann. I said, I'm going to walk down and see if I can call a moose. She says, I don't know how to call a moose. You mind? I said, no, come on down, Ann. And I give a call from camp, and sure as shit, there's a bull answer. I go, you hear that?
Cool.
She goes, is that a moose? I said, yeah, that was a bull. And I give another, and then all of a sudden you can goes, he's in the water. I said, yeah, he might come right across.
Yeah,
and, you know, it was exciting.
You got to be careful when you're starting to call moose. I remember I showing off to my wife one time. I'm like, hey, look at this, honey. And I'm throwing this call. And we wait, nothing. We walk down the trail, come back. We're carrying our little kids with us. Big bull right in the middle of the trail. You know how they can be aggressive, eh?
Yeah.
But it didn't like my dog, and it took off. So the dog saved us.
I've never really had any issues with them being like aggressive to the point where I'd worry about them.
I've heard it. I've heard one bad story, but I've never experienced it.
Yeah, like the first bull I ever shot was at 13 yards, and I was dressed in all black. I've got my bow up on my head like this, and I'm calling. I called him across a wide open marsh for 150 yards. Cool. And he's coming in, and he's got the snot running down the nose.
Nothing.
And the
eyes the best.
Yeah, you know. Yeah. At no point did I feel threatened with that bull.
Right.
You know what I mean? Even though he was being a bull and being, you know, and he'd give a call and rake a tree in the swamp, and I'd give a little paddle and stand up and grunt, and he'd just, whoa, and he'd come running 20 yards, and he'd stop another tree, whoa, and I just do the same thing back, and he'd do this until the next thing you know, he's at 13 yards, and I'd quill him through the lungs, and like, but that is the most exhilarating hunt that I've only shot 3 moose with a bow, but
only
they are, and my buddy Aaron Stone, the first moose we ever got as a group, I was calling, got him coming in, just a nice, 35-inch bull or something like that, and he was coming in. I've got him at full draw at 10 yards away, but he's standing facing me like this, and Aaron's just over my right-hand shoulder type thing, and he's only a few yards away from me, and I've got a black spruce right in front of me. I can't shoot this damn thing, and I'm holding it full draw, and it seemed like an eternity. And then he kind of just turns a bit, and I still got no shot, and all of a sudden I hear, shoot, and he bolts, and I let go because I know he's, and he goes, I go, you better hit him, Aaron. Right there, right there. And I go, right on. I said, I think I touched him too. He goes, oh, no way you touched him. I said, I think I hit him, bud.
Nice.
And
where were you?
We were in, that one was Horn Pain.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And great moose hunting area. But it got so hard to get a tag. It was ridiculous. He comes up and he goes, oh, look at the blood on that arrow, buddy. And I go, that's my arrow, bud. He goes, holy shit, that is your arrow. But we went, and he had laid a perfect, he had just hit that thing so perfect. And that was a chore. That one was a 1.2 kilometer quarter carry. Wow. Yeah. And he had a fucked up back.
You plan for it though, right?
Oh,
you plan for these pack outs, right?
That's it.
It would have been hard on alone to get one. If you did venture far from camp, and you got one when you're starting to get weaker, it's almost like, would you just set up next to the moose and just start eating it until you had your energy and then take it back?
That's the thing. If it was late enough, I just get it high enough in a tree that, put the 4 quarters up in the trees, carry what I can back, take all, the prime stuff, the tongue and all the organs and what have you, the first shot, and with the fat on it, and then worry about the rest. I was more worried about shooting one early when it was warm.
Right.
And how the hell am I going to get all this smoke? And I said, the water temperature was cold enough.
Yeah.
I was just going to put it on a big piece of paracord and fire it out in 20 feet of water.
Yeah.
There was enough deep drop offs right there. And, they talk about fishing, and Alan and I, that was one of the biggest advantages. Mikey made gorgeous lures. Like the lures he made, but he's from
shallow.
Georgia.
Oh.
He's fishing catfish and sunfish and bluegills or whatever, and largemouth bass. He's never seen a pike. He's never seen a lake trout. He's never seen a whitefish.
Fished the Canadian Shield.
No.
Yeah.
And
this is like our dream to go and fish reindeer. It's like exactly what we have to work way harder to do to then just go there and, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And have, it's like.
And if you notice, Alan and I, we'd fire our lures out and we'd wait.
Yeah.
We'd let them sink and get down into that zone where
Do you count to 3? You count to 4?
Or 10, and, letting it get it. And
no wonder you snagged on bottom a couple of times.
Yep. And, you had to get down there because otherwise you were getting on. Right. And it was weird because, and I know why him and I talked about it, they were surfacing everywhere. Like on every calm night, it was just splash, 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 splash. Like the lake was just bubbling with fish. And, but he just didn't know how to make those lures and how to get down. You know, he had the right shapes, the right sizes, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
He just wasn't getting to the target zone where the fish were. And Alan and I had that advantage.
Yeah. One of the things was a challenge for me was it was very shallow where I was fishing. So once it got colder, the fish were retreating to deeper water.
Right.
And I was just catching these like just dinks. Like, you know, I would be like, yeah, I'd be like nothing like you guys are catching. We did get into some like that earlier on, but then the problem was the tides had to be right for me to actually even access an area where you could fish.
Right.
So when the tide was like too low, it was like 2 feet deep. You couldn't get out any deeper. And then when the tide was in, the waves are crashing up into this thicket of bushes and a cliff. And I remember one time, man, there's this whole school of sablefish. Every time we'd hear, the sea lions and seals out there. And then that would trigger us. Oh, the sablefish are coming back. For whatever reason, they just swim around this freaking bay we were in like a tornado. And I'd run out there and I'd throw my freaking line in and I would catch two. I had 2 hooks on. I'd catch 2 as fast as I could rebait it. The problem was I wasn't rebaiting it fast enough, right? But then it would be over. Right. You know what I mean? So, and they weren't near as big as the ones you caught, but you could just eat the bones and stuff.
Yeah.
And oh man, that was fun. But I remember one time I'm on them and I'm like getting pushed back into the freaking trees and the tide's coming in and I'm like, I just had to like bail and managed to catch 18 of them. You know what I mean? And, you know, which was just, and there's, you know how good the food tastes.
Oh,
you know? Yeah. Hunger is the best seasoning, right?
Oh, God.
Yeah.
That first fish I got, you know, when I did my happy dance and stuff there, you know, I'm a big guy and I eat 3 squares a day and I hadn't eaten in 4 full days. This is day 5. So when I seen that white belly at that gill net, those were true emotions. Like,
oh, man,
you know, that fish. I'll never forget the first taste of that fish. Like it was just incredible.
Incredible, eh?
Yeah. It was. And it, you know, it's at those moments that justify your existence of being there and give you that boost of confidence. You know, once I got that first fish, you know, it was kind of like there was no looking back. You know, it was like, okay, we can do this.
Yeah.
And you know, okay, it might take 4 or 5 days. And, you know, that's losing those 2 fish in that live well. That cost me 4 days. I didn't eat for 4 days because of that mistake. You know, never made it again. Would I do it
4
again?
days.
No, I wouldn't. Because, you know, even though I watched someone else make that mistake, I thought my luck was better than that. But
it's like, do you prepare for these rogue otters to cut? Like you could have probably, let's say essentially you could have left the fish there 10, 20 times in a row. Yep. Maybe you just got unlucky. Do you plan for, you know, the 1 in 20, 1 in 50 times every night? I think maybe the answer is you do. That's kind of my, you know, you
have to, you know, and once they've done it once,
they're not dumb.
No, they're coming every day, you know, and that's how I got the couple Martins I got. They were coming around, and like once they started coming around, it was just every day, and it was like, okay,
they're habituated.
We'll figure you out. And
they start training you.
You know, I just stick the red squirrel guts out there, and it wasn't long they were coming along. Free meal. Well, here's an arrow for you. Too.
Yeah. Did you try eating them?
Oh,
you ate them? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they were delicious.
I've never eaten a weasel. You hear bad things about eating weasels.
Yeah, I couldn't believe how good they tasted. And like a couple of the old trappers, Len Locke and that taught me how to trap and what have you. They're going, you ate a goddamn martin? I said, they were good. You were fucking starving.
I thought the same thing. I know people that eat them too all the time up near, like they're the only trappers I ever known to eat them, but they eat otters, martins, fishers.
Lynx are like,
I hear lynx are just good.
Yeah. You know, you think about a cat and it's like, but apparently the mountain lions are delicious too.
I've heard. I also like a lot of, I'm pretty easy to please, which was great. I noticed you on your season and due to, you know, your skills and abilities too, as well, you seem to have more yummy food on average than I did. Like I'm eating tons of things, but I'm eating like limpets and the sea stuff and these gunnelfish, which were fish, but you know, I had to like stomp on them and they, you know, they just looked like writhing eels, you know, like you're not seeing that on any like menus at any restaurants. I'll
Right.
tell you that much right now. You know what I mean? So I thought, man, these guys are doing well. They're eating good. One thing that would have been great, and you probably would have had beaver. I don't see any beaver dams.
There were none.
Were there none? Were you allowed to get beaver?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was looking for it.
yeah.
Like me being a
because they're so fatty. But once it freezes, well, you know how to trap beaver.
and that's it. And I had no worries about shooting one, you
Right.
know, and guys going on, and I had no fear of that. And if I had found a beaver, it's only a matter of time that I'm going to figure out where to get it.
Right.
You know.
Right. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
That's Benjamin, the guy who shot the beaver.
I didn't.
On season 9 or
okay.
season 8,
I
whichever
don't
it
think
was.
I saw that. Yeah.
And he's skinning it. He got sick. And when he was fleshing out the skin of the beaver, he's putting all the fat and stuff on the tail. And he hadn't skinned out the tail and stuff yet. Well, the tail's the most disgusting part on a beaver. It's the dirtiest part. They actually shit on their tail and eat it.
Right.
And that's because all they eat is bark and wood and the odd grass and stuff.
No wonder these things can survive so well. They just eat their own shit and thrive out there.
Well, they need to for the digestion.
Right.
And because of that, their tail, and they're carrying all the mud that they're building their dams and all the stuff that they gather on. The tail is the dirtiest part of the beaver. And here he was
using as a table.
Right.
Ah,
And
see, I wouldn't have known that.
I think that's his biggest mistake.
Right.
I can't swear to it. That because I haven't spoke to the man.
Right.
But I would say that is what caused him to have that bacterial illness.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. That's something you got to be careful out there. I guess I've been lucky. I've never really had any sicknesses and stuff. One time, I think from just drinking a lot of swamp water, I did.
Yep.
But unfortunately, I was traveling up to James Bay from about Cochrane, and I thought that I was going to be going paddling through a beaver swamp, which the map showed and the notes from the last guy did showed. Well, there was no dam there anymore. So I was just like hauling up this narrow stream, like over logs, mud. But because of the beaver meadow, there's freaking wild mint everywhere.
Oh, nice.
So I was literally, it works. It lasts for about half an hour. So you just eat a bunch of what you have that giardia your stomach like this, pound a bunch of wild mint, you're good. Then it comes back, pound a bunch of wild mint, and I could just eat it as I went along, almost like a bear. You cruise along eating berries, and then I was able to pass it. I don't know if that's from the wild mint or not, but I've been pretty lucky for the most part, you know, and not getting sick out there. But it happens, you know.
Yeah, know, and I grew up where you eat everything.
Right.
And, I've probably ate some things that most people would never eat. And
I ate a barn swallow once.
right.
Well, I was in the boathouse, you know, you're going to shoot it. You got to eat it. Right. I mean, I think there maybe are exceptions to that rule, but
I won't mention any names, but there was somebody that shot a couple small birds on the show and ate them. And, we weren't allowed to shoot. I was fucking starving. Camera was off.
Yeah.
Whatever. And, that's where guys like Alan, the integrity of that man.
Yeah.
That duck that he released, that martin he released.
Yeah.
I can't say I would have done that.
Right.
I would now
right.
after talking with him, learning, and understanding the true nature of fair competition is fair chase. I do it with my hunting. I'm a full fair chase hunter. And that competition should be, and Alan is the type of man that showed that integrity, and he showed it to all his students and everybody who watched. And he's every bit as great a man as that show portrayed him to be.
Good. Yeah. He also did it in such a way that, he wasn't being like overly soft or sensitive about it. I don't know if I want to use those words, but some people might be a little bit too like bunny hugger about the whole thing. But where he was he just had a perfect sweet spot,
and he is a hunter, right? He's second place twice in the national BC archery competition. The guy can shoot a bow.
Yeah.
And Cade I would say he's better than Alan and me combined. You know, like
What, at archery?
At archery, like
So how much? Like, I wanted to ask you. So you grew up, or you did a lot of archery, shooting bow.
Yep.
How much did you practice before heading out there? Were you always that good? Because I didn't see you miss anything.
No, well, I did.
Yeah, it didn't make the cut.
No, they didn't make. But I did shoot a lot. You know, like by the time I left there was not a goddamn grouse or a red squirrel or anything left in my area. You couldn't find a track. I'd killed everything.
Right.
You know, so, but I did miss. But I've always shot my brother.
Yeah.
The guy, he's an incredible shot. Like, I'll never be the shot my brother is. But we used to always, my brother, I can remember we had one of the old SAC targets one time, and he painted a dartboard on it. And we go play darts with the bow and arrows.
Cool.
And, you know, my buddy Aaron, Chris Spires, Jeff Spires, Joe, we all shot bows. And because they were quiet and all that, we could just go every evening. And instead of playing darts or playing pool or whatever, we had archery competitions in our own, you know.
Yeah. Well, what kid doesn't want to be like Robin Hood?
Exactly, right?
Doesn't love like bow and arrows, right?
Yeah.
It's just that some people kind of give it up and some people don't, right? I feel
Exactly. My youngest son, Evan, he's the one who got me big into shooting the recurves. And, you know, he's a wicked little shot. And, you know, and now I'm going to go to the longbow. You know, it's just kind of, I'm regressing backwards. And I'm becoming more and more primitive.
Next thing, it's going to be in that ladle.
Yeah, right. You know, I'd love to try one. Just you know,
I'm sure I'd blow it the first few tries.
You know, I'd probably blow my shoulder out.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I love all that stuff. It's the same, you know, but like Cade, like I said, he'd shoot from all these. We had a practice site out there, and holy shit, man, that boy can shoot.
Wow. So how important do you think was your archery ability at doing as well as you did on the show in the end? Did you get a lot of calories from that?
No, I burnt more than but
mentally?
It helped mentally.
Okay.
And it did other things. You know, I didn't specifically just go hunting. I had a route where my snares, I only snared one red squirrel. Those little pricks got onto it. Once I snared that one red squirrel, I was watching the other ones. They'd come and they'd jump. Like, I would have them on deadfall logs that were coming down. I watched them literally jump over my snares.
No
They
kidding.
just caught onto that.
Oh, man.
And they'd hear me. It got to the point where they knew I was coming through the bush, and you'd hear them, and they'd all be talking back and forth. And they didn't realize they were giving themselves away, though. And I was kind of, okay, I'm right, you little bastard. Go over there and wait. And I just sit and wait. And then he'd come out, and it's like, okay, I would just watch him. Wouldn't even let him know. And then I wait for him to go up that one tree where I knew he wasn't getting away from, and I'd head over there.
Squirrel hunting is fun.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
It's fun as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those red squirrels, they don't taste as bad as everyone says.
No, I couldn't believe how good they tasted. I was like, what the hell's everyone talking about?
Yeah. That's the same. I didn't eat one for years. And one time me and a buddy were super hungry, and we're like, you want to get this squirrel? He's like, oh, I hear they taste bad. You ever tried one? Well, no. Next thing you know, like, it's pretty good.
Right.
Still was hungry afterwards because I ate much food, but you know.
I was taking them and I would I'd roast them. And when they were all roasted, head on, eyeballs, everything, you know, I just, you know, and I'd roast them over my smoker, and then I'd cut them into quarters type thing, and I'd throw them in my soup pot, and I'd throw a handful of lingonberries, a handful of crowberries, a handful of bearberries, a handful of blueberries, whatever berries I had in my bucket. I just carried a bucket, and I was filling it with all 4 kinds that we could find out there, and didn't care, you know, and I'd throw a handful of those in, chop up some of the bolete or hedgehog mushrooms I'd found, throw that in, and then that nice white fluffy ash that you get from your fire.
Yeah. Tell me about that ash, man.
It's it's an old indigenous thing. Many native cultures use it. It gives you potassium and different minerals in your body. And it's an amazing flavoring. It's just, and I'd take like a big handful of it, just fire it right in my soup pot.
Shit.
And that soup was, and I'll tell you, when it got cold, coming back and after splitting firewood and doing all your daily routine and sitting there and just having that comfort of that warmth. And it was the same waking up in the morning. I would take a handful of berries, throw them in my pot, bring it to a boil, and have a berry tea. And I would just drink that, and when it was done, I'd just eat all the berries.
Right.
And then at night, I'd have Labrador tea.
Yeah, good stuff, eh?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind the spruce tip tea and all that too.
I guess there'd be no cedar up there. Me and my
Very
brother
little.
were
Was the
drinking
odd.
cedar, and man, did it ever hit the spot sometimes. You know.
But that Labrador tea, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
I picked a bunch of it while I was up north moose hunting this year and brought it home and dried it out.
Yeah. It stains the water so quickly too, doesn't it? Like you can just tell it's working.
I don't know. It was always dark when I didn't even look at it. I just, it was dark every time I drank it. So I don't even know what it looked like.
Yeah. It looks like greenish tea, I guess. It stains it more green.
Yeah, I was mixing it with the black spruce needles when I was cleaning my wound.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much the Labrador tea helped, but I was told it would, but I knew that. And because I'd cut all that black spruce, that fresh pitch that was oozing out of it was at its peak of antiseptic properties. So I just lather that on.
And do you think if you didn't have that sort of bush first aid knowledge of making the antiseptic tea out of the Labrador tea and spruce tips, right? Is what you made out of. And if you didn't know about using spruce resin, do you think that it would have become a much more of a serious issue? Yeah,
guaranteed.
Yeah.
Like everything's dirty out there. Like you can't help it. Your hands are dirty. You're cleaning fish. You're cleaning squirrels. You're cleaning grouse. Everything else. So. You've got no soap, so you're cleaning the best you can.
Right.
I went swimming virtually every day till October 10th.
Oh, nice.
And
wow.
October 10th,
Ballsy.
That was the first scene. I walk out bare ass naked and go for a swim. And that's why I said it's going to be called the bleep and blur season, because I swear a lot and I love being naked. And I ran around naked all the time, and that's just me. And, I remember I was sitting down at Chuck's Roadhouse because we were doing a donation thing for the food bank there. And if you were going to watch me starve on television, why don't you help the local food bank and bring a donation?
It's a good hook. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it was great. We raised like 500 pounds of food or something. It was pretty cool. And, but we're sitting at Chuck's, my wife and my 2 kids and a bunch of our friends and everybody's sitting around. And first scene there, I walk out naked and the whole place just erupts with laughter. My phone just started going zzz, 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 zzz. My nieces and nephews, Uncle Wyatt. And it was a blast.
What are you going to do? Soak a pair of your boxers? Like, no.
Exactly.
It'd be stupid, right?
And it's one of those things, we live in a world where we teach people to be ashamed of their body. And that's so wrong.
Right.
I won't mention any names, but one of the guys that was on the show, he was talking about dating this girl from Sweden. And when he was in university, and he went over to Sweden and they had dinner and all the rest of it. And after dinner, they went to the sauna. And her sister and her brother and her mother and her father and her grandparents and they all peeled off their clothes completely naked. And got in the sauna.
Well, that's how they roll in Sweden, and shit, man,
and lots of other places.
Yeah.
And
France
he's like,
and stuff.
Oh my god, like what? And he says, "Well, this kind of," and she goes, "This is weird. Why would you think it's? These people have seen me naked since the day I was born.
Right?
Why do you think I should feel shame about being naked in front of the people I love the most?
It's so true, isn't it?
Right. But we breed that in Western.
Not
culture.
to say I'm about to jump into that culture.
No, but but it's one of those things where. We should never, teach our kids or anybody else to be ashamed of what we are. Yeah. Because if you're not yourself, who the fuck are you?
Maybe another thing you learn from competitive sports, you got to shower after the game. You just fucking get over it, so you don't want to stink like hockey equipment.
Well, and you get ridiculed far more for being a stinky bastard than you would for having a small dick or whatever.
Right. Nobody, because then it's like, what are you looking at my dick for, bud? Exactly. Right. So nobody says anything, right?
Yeah, I know. That's something we breed into people, and we shouldn't. We should go the other way, all down through Europe, and that they have nude beaches and stuff, and we grow up with that mindset of not worrying about it. Here a girl is worried whether she shaves her armpits or not.
Right.
Whereas in Germany and Sweden and stuff, they don't do it at all.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. Live in a society where women go topless more often. Why does anyone have an issue with that? You know what I mean?
that's right.
You know?
It's
Guys do it all the time, right?
well, and
Just how it
you
is.
take all those
Yeah.
cultures that
Yeah.
do not have the negativity and animosity towards nudity and being naked, also have no sexual assaults. They don't have the predator,
Interesting.
right?
Interesting.
And we've got, you look at the
Maybe
world.
you could just go crush Naked and Afraid as your next series. The way
But
that
I'm not
suggests
afraid of
that.
nothing.
It would just be Naked and Naked.
That's right.
Nothing. Yeah, we should just go smash that show. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, it's so true though. It's like it's such your sort of natural state, and especially when you're in the bush and you're trying to get back to nature. You know, who cares? You know?
Exactly. You know, and like being out there and just breathing, you know, it's like sitting by a fire. I don't know if a lot of people do it. You know, you talk about cleaning. There's nothing more clean than a smoke bath. And Indigenous people used it forever. And I do it for all, you know, these guys go out and they spend all kinds of money, scent-free stuff and their hunting stuff and all the rest of it. Go grab yourself a great big pile of balsam or a great big pile of cedar and get yourself a fire going and stand there and give yourself a complete smoke bath, smoke all your clothes, all the rest of it. You'll have no trouble.
Yeah, or now you can buy the pucks that smell like smoke.
Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like, what's the point?
Charcoal's been a great deodorizer forever.
Do you use that when you're hunting?
Yep.
Yeah. What do you do with it?
I just take it and I put it in my boots. You know, I used it for brushing my teeth out there. Use it for washing your hands, your face, whichever.
So when you put charcoal in your boots, you just like crush up, put it in, and then shake it around and dump it out.
Well, you know what a hot shot is, or you know, those little heat pads.
Oh yeah.
That's all they are is charcoal.
Oh, no kidding. What keeps them going hot?
It's some kind of active that they put in it, and I don't. But it's a charcoal base. So if you take charcoal and you grind it all up, and you put it on underneath your soles or whatever, it works as an antiperspirant, as a natural. You know,
great tip.
Yeah, they're guys. You know, guys have been using charcoal for. Putting in fans and stuff for growing weed rooms and stuff. They use it as to kill the senescence on their exhaust.
Just so people don't bust
Charcoal
them.
filters are common in all kinds of places.
And also for filtering water too.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, natural
good.
purifier.
I'm loving it. Learning a few outdoor tips here, man.
Well, I'll tell you, guys used to talk about having a fire when they're out deer hunting. And go, oh, you can't. I've had deer walk right up within 20 yards of me at a fire. As long as you're not moving and making a bunch of noise. You think about living up here in the Muskokas and all the rest of it, how many wood fires are burning in every house around?
Not to mention forest fires that happen sometimes from miles and miles away, right?
It's
that aren't any threat
smell.
to them. Yeah.
And that's the thing, like deer and moose and bears and stuff, they aren't worried about smells they don't know. They worry about threatening smells. You know, there's guys that'll talk about vegetarians and vegans, how animals walk right up to them because a vegetarian does not threat. We put off a smell as a carnivore or an omnivore that herbivores can sense.
Wow.
They know to avoid carnivores.
That's wild.
Omnivores.
That's wild. Yeah.
Vegetarians doesn't bother them at all.
Yeah. Sounds like something that maybe has, one of those things we might not understand everything about. You know,
we always do it. You know, vanilla is another one. Works as a great scent cover.
Oh, cool.
We used to, when we raise rabbits and you'd have a mother rabbit, if you take her out to handle the babies, you just put a drop of vanilla on her nose and she couldn't smell you touch the babies. Because if she could smell you touch the babies, she'd kill them all.
Oh, yeah. So, rabbits, just baby killers.
Yeah, they are. They're terrible for it.
Any rabbits out there? I didn't see many.
It was funny because we never seen a track. And yet at camp, when we were staying at Arctic Lodges, there was rabbits running around everywhere. We were going, oh man,
we're going to be loading in.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. Well, I forget who it was. It was somebody that from season 2, I think they said, you know, you head out there with plan A and a lot of time you end on like plan D or whatever.
Yep.
Right. Is there anything that you learned about survival that was that you weren't expecting to learn, or what it's really all about compared to what the books make it seem like it is?
One of the things was the importance of sodium. The thing that really took me out was the dehydration. My body started breaking down. Alan and I both had the same problem. We both had orange urine by the time we left, and that was our tissue and muscles breaking down.
Because you can't retain water without a certain amount of salt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I had studied colt's foot and different aquatic plants, and that's why we had no moose and deer and bears or caribou out there in our area, because there was none of those plants with the sodium. They need it as much as we do.
Right.
That's why they come to mineral licks and all the rest of it,
100%.
salt licks and what
That side of the highway.
Exactly. So out there where there's no highways and there's no human involvement, they have to source it naturally. And plants like colt's foot and different aquatic plants and stuff, they have that.
Right.
That's why the moose weren't in our area, because we had none of that.
Yeah.
That's why the beavers weren't in our area, because we had none of that.
Right.
You know, everything needs, and that was the one thing we were lacking. And that's why Luke took salt, and numerous other people over the years have taken salt.
And what was that? What was the plants that you said that
Colt's foot?
Colt's foot.
Yeah, that's one of the common ones.
It's aquatic?
No, it grows on land.
Okay.
But a lot of your tubers and rhizomes from your different bulrushes and lily pads. And
you ever eaten lily pad tubers before?
I haven't. Like duck potatoes. They call.
Gross. Well, the ones that duck potatoes, those are pretty good. The ones that are like from the arrowheads.
Yeah.
But the arrowheads, I forget which ones. It's the arrowheads that are more curved in. Those ones where you can pull it up and it's at the bottom. But it's the straight up lily pad tubers. I'd read about it and everything. I tried them on alone. I think it's one of those things you have to boil and dump the water out like 20 times. I did it like 3 times and I almost barfed. Like I still got them down. I didn't, but I was just like, oh God,
right,
not pleasant.
The duck potatoes, they go around and they actually would walk in the shallows and pop them off with their toes.
Okay,
they feel them and then they float. And then they go and pick them all up.
Okay, so maybe this is so the ones I'm talking about might be a little bit different than because they're a little bit deeper into the mud that are at the bottom of the arrowheads.
Right.
What does the top of the duck potato plant look like?
It's an arrowhead.
Is it?
Plant.
Okay.
But you know they're going around in the mud and they feel them with their toes and then they pop them off with their toes and then they come around and pick them all up. And it's funny because half these plants, I studied my ass off to go out there, and I was showing different things about the book and all the pages that I had, because I only studied the plants for that area, you know, and that's what it's like when I was talking about the mushrooms and stuff and sticking a piece under. There's a lot of how do I want to say it? Manipulation to the story, if we want to say, by the production crew on that, but it was still kind of for fun. And
just to make it look more dangerous, maybe, or just probably just so people were scared, so they didn't run out and start pounding mushrooms.
Yeah, and I
die.
gave some kind of maybe bad advice, or you know, not good advice. That's for sure. And I was 99% sure that was a hedgehog mushroom,
right?
But I never held one in my hand. Right. And I go mushroom foraging all the time.
Right.
But I'm familiar with all the ones that I have around here. And I had never seen that type of mushroom. And there was like a 5-pound bunch of them. Like they were great big. And I'm like, and I'm looking at them.
It's tricky with mushrooms because sometimes they taste good even if they're not good.
Well, and that's it. And sometimes the mice and squirrels can eat them and we can't. But I've never come across one.
Yeah.
I know it's not. I know that there's some that we can eat or that they can eat, and it'll screw our livers.
It's a pretty. It's a lot better than not having that to go off of.
Right, and you know, like I said, I was 99.9% sure, but I'm going by memory of something I've read in a book instead of something, you know.
Yeah.
And
that was a good amount of mushrooms. Like at that point, I could see how excited you would have been to eat those. And plus, you got 2 partridges and a squirrel, I think, maybe at least maybe 2 partridges that day.
That day, I got 2 spruce grouse. Yeah. That day was just incredible. Like I woke up knowing that day was going to be different. I could feel it. It was just, you know.
That was the day that you lost your lure earlier on, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was actually funny as hell because I woke up, I talk about it all on the camera, how this day is going to be better. And I go down and I cast and I get like 6 to 7 pound lake trout, beauty lake trout.
Amazing.
Get him in. And they didn't show it, but I go up the camera and I've got the lure and I'm like bragging. I'm going, hey, if you're coming to Reindeer Lake and you want a lure that we know works, if you talk nice, I might make you one. If you're an asshole, not a chance. And, you know, I'm just being a cocky ass to the camera.
Right.
And then I walk out, and the first cast in the goddamn line it wraps around my reel, and my lure goes flying out.
Of course.
And I go, and they didn't show that either. I go,
man, that was nice
that's
of
what
them.
being cocky. Look
Yeah.
at that. I deserve. That's what is that
Instant
land
karma.
show, right?
Yeah.
And I just laughed about it. You know, it was kind of, but like I lost 3 lures out there that were working really good. And every time I did, it was just like, oh my God. And that lure, that day, it was just, I'd already missed a fish early.
Yeah.
I'd only had like 6 casts, and I'd already had one fish in the onshore and another one missed and another one to follow up.
Yeah.
Like it was going to be that morning, and I didn't have another lure to go.
And it was such a perfect morning too.
I
It's
know.
like every time you lost a lure, it was perfect
Right.
fishing conditions.
I know.
Of course. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is.
That's wild. So aren't you? You're selling those lures, though, aren't you?
I'm
Or
gonna
you're
be. I'm working with my buddy Aaron right now and some different airbrush people. We're just working on getting the weights to work properly and what have you. And I'm gonna call it the Gold Hellfire series. One of the best
Guaranteed.
things I ever did was name those lures. There was the Gold Hellfire, and then there was the Gold Fury, and then there was the Gold Demon, and then the Gold Devil, and then the Little Demon, and they all worked.
Yeah.
And, work for lake trout, work for pike. I'll try them out a lot more.
And whitey, you caught a whitey, or was
Those
that
were
your
in my
net?
gill net.
Okay.
Yeah. And, it was, they were working. And same with Allen's lake trout baby 1 and 2. They were working good.
Those were good too. Those were kind of like a jig head.
Yeah,
Almost
they
that
were
you
almost like a J plug type thing. Allen lives out in BC, kind of like a, I guess you'd call it a hoochie type. He made it kind of look like a plug, and then with a tail with the feathers and shit coming off.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know what they're called, like a skirted, jig head or something like that.
So
it was working, man. He was doing great.
Yeah, he's gonna have a couple made up for when him and I are gonna do a spring fishing trip here. Go and chase some northern pike and some walleye and stuff around, and maybe hit a couple lake trout lakes and spend 4 or 5 days out there telling lies and watching. He's a great guy. Him and I spent about 13 days together after in rehab. Right.
Well, they don't let you go home right away,
yeah.
right? You got to hang out.
We were both in pretty rough shape.
Yeah.
That's
13 days is a while.
Yeah. Well, I had edema. And then we got into some bad weather, and they wouldn't fly. So we spent 2 days in Saskatoon, where it was nice because first night him and I went out and we attacked pizza and wings, and then the second night we went out and hit an all-you-could-eat buffet. So
how much were you able to put down?
Oh,
a good amount.
Yeah.
So that goes to tell me how much food you were still getting out there.
Yeah,
because when I tried to get out, I couldn't eat that much. I still did, but I felt super full after eating like a handful of grapes and like a piece of toast.
Right.
I felt bloated and full, and I had to kind of slowly eat.
Not me. Like I ate every day.
Right.
From about day 34 on. I don't think I missed a day.
It's hard to imagine how, like I said, again, we take for granted how much food we need, but I wonder if it's the lack of fat, the lack of salt. Fish don't have a ton of fat in them.
No.
Neither do partridge have or rough grouse. Technically, they don't have there's hardly anything there.
That's why I ate every organ. I ate the brains. I ate the eyeballs. When I haven't plucked a grouse. I grew up where you step on the wings and breast them. I plucked every bird out and left every bit of skin on. So you take note of that, and that was one of the things that you learn not to waste things, like there was not a morsel of that and people ask me what I took most out of it, and I found it a very humbling experience, and when I come back, that's how I describe my experience. And then when they aired the show, I literally got thousands of messages.
Wow.
People who had inspired, people who'd had drinking problems and drug problems.
That was really inspiring, actually.
Yeah, not something I'm proud of, but at least something good come out of it.
Yeah.
And the fact that I touched so many people and resonated with them, and on such a level that they felt comfortable enough that they could reach out and talk to me. And I tried to answer everybody I could. And I think I got them all, but I'm totally new to technical. I never had social media until the show. So it's kind of one of I've never had Facebook. I've never had Instagram.
Now you're just blowing up.
I know, right? It's,
What's your Instagram?
Wyatt Black 1971.
Wyatt Black. Yeah, you're sharing some pretty great stuff there too as well.
All about positive, you know, and that's the thing I love about everybody who's following me is everybody's staying positive. And I won't put anything on that's negative. Negativity feeds negativity and positivity feeds positivity.
Right.
And that's why, you know, a positive attitude goes so far in life. And that's why, you know, you talk about me being on the show and how I knew I had to keep. If you start dwelling on the negative, that's where it's going to take you, is to further and further into the negative.
What did you tell yourself?
I didn't really tell myself anything. I looked at the blessings I had and I appreciated everything so much. Every sunset, watching the northern lights. The one night, the moon, I felt like I could reach out and touch it. It was so close and so bright.
So you just connected with your surroundings, with nature.
Totally.
Yeah.
I felt so at home there. It was unbelievable. It took a while. It was day 34 where I talked about actually coming to terms with the land. And the natives, that's what they believed out there, that's why Mother Nature treated me so well, was because she had a purpose for me. And that's why I didn't win, is because but she was going to look after me while I was out there. And she did. Like, it was truly a healing process. And it's hard to describe. You know, when you're trying to describe a feeling, how do you do it? How do you do it justice? You know, whether it's be sad, whether it be happy, it doesn't matter what that feeling or emotion is. How do you really portray it? You know, a guy named Justin Rain was talking about, you know, I grew up in an era where boys don't cry. Don't be crying on it, you know.
Look, I never,
shut up or I'll give you something to cry about.
I've never seen my dad cry once in my entire life.
Exactly. And he was talking about, as parents and all that, we're living in a generation where there's a lot of suicides, a lot of self-harm, a lot of... Teach your kids that it's okay to cry, so you know that something's bothering them, so you know that they need help. Because if they're not expressing it and they're hiding everything, they're just shoving it down, and you end up being like I was. And that's the wrong way to be. You know, I tell my kids all the time that I love them. My dad never told me that in my life. I know my dad loves me, but you still crave to hear it, you know, and as a parent, you learn to not make the same mistakes as your father did. And my dad used to always say it, I should be a better father than mine was. You should be a better father than I was. And your kid should be a better father than you were. If things go right. But you got to be open and honest and talk about it. And
I mean, part of the problem too is that kids copy what they see their dad doing, right? I didn't know, nobody ever taught me that I should, you know, my dad never said, "Oh, get out there, you pussy," or you know, like, you know, once in a while he said I need to get some lead in my ass or something like that. We probably had a point. I don't even know what that meant. But you know, I remember my first...
Get the lead out of your ass.
Something like that. Yeah. Maybe he just screwed it up. I don't know.
It's a heavy weight. Get your ass moving. Wait, you got lead in your ass?
I'm just standing around wondering what the hell he said.
What are you talking about, old man?
But absolutely. But my first memories of my dad were him building docks and chopping down trees and carrying them over his shoulder. So it wasn't like, get out there, I just didn't work hard. It's just like, that's just what I thought you did.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And then if I can improve off of whatever he did, you know, we just create a better and better world. That's why I thought it was great that you got that message out there, because I think the thing that's interesting about it is these are things that everybody kind of deals with, but they're super relatable, yet nobody really talks about them.
No, you know, I come home and I actually apologize to my dad. And people go, and I don't agree with everything that we dealt with growing up. But he had his reasons.
Didn't he put the boots to you when you had the marina or whatever? Like when you owned a marina.
Hardly seen him.
Yeah.
I was 9 years old when he bought the marina, and he had to keep his job down in General Tire in Barrie.
Yeah.
So he worked worked Monday night, Tuesday, Wednesday, come home Wednesday night, work all night in the shop, drive back to General Tire Thursday, work Thursday, Friday, drive home Friday night, work Friday night, Saturday, Sunday in the shop, dark till dark, and then do it all again. He did that for 5 years.
Yeah.
So I hardly seen him.
Mm-hmm.
I regretted it. I resented it.
Ran a marina at such a young age.
I did everything as far as looking after my younger brothers and sisters, cooking the dinners, and my brother and I doing the firewood, cutting the grass, shoveling the snow, just everything. And there was no choice in it, And so basically, we lost our childhood per se, and we lost our father. Previous to that, he had all the time to go hunting, go fit.
Right.
Then there was none of it.
Yeah.
You got to go on occasion, and really resented it. And it was like I always felt that I never was doing good enough. And maybe he kind of reinforced that a bit, but when I was out on Reindeer Lake, I always blamed my dad for my alcohol abuse. I used him as my excuse for and when I was out there, I started remembering, oh man, I can remember when Dad taught me this. I can remember when Dad and I did this. I can remember all these things that I'd forgot. And it wasn't that I'd forgot them. It was I spent all my time dwelling on the negative, that I pushed aside all the good he did. And that time out there allowed me to regain those positive memories, to reflect on the good things, and to forget about the bad. The weight that was lifted just by being, and like I said, I wouldn't be able to do, I wasn't a guy to go lay on a couch and talk to a shrink.
I could tell, or just lay on a couch in general.
Right. So being out there and no alcohol, no drugs, no nothing, me and the truth, and Mother Nature to help me heal. And that's what it did. And it didn't just heal me on one level, it was on many levels. And it reestablished a connection that I'd lost with my dad 50 some years ago. Or
got back to that baseline or something.
And remembering the positive, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to be on that show. And I wouldn't have been able to do as good as I did. And it was all the truth that allowed me to realize that. And once again, appreciate it. And it gave me something back.
Yeah. Amazing, man. That's well said. And, I can, no two people's experience are the same. But for me, little things that I thought were a big deal, I realized were just petty when I was out there. Right. And I realized that things that I worried about, regardless of relationships, but just things that I worried about in my life were like nothing. I'm like, what have I been worrying about this stuff for so much?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And what we need, I was truly happy out there and I had nothing.
You looked happy, man.
I was. My eyes were even blue.
Yeah. You could tell that you were just even like way into the show.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When a lot of people are miserable. I remember thinking out there, God, nature is beautiful, but it's kicking my ass right now. You know what I mean? I don't know. And even though I kept doing it and grinding it out, I don't know if I was as happy as you out there from a day-to-day basis. You know what I mean? I also had my brother that we were grinding my gears back and forth.
Right, yeah.
That was a good thing about my brother, though, is that even though, like, because I had another person there that knows me at my worst since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I'm not embarrassed. We're not embarrassed to act extremely immature in front of each other.
Yeah.
And because of that, we tend to not bottle things up. Where if there's somebody else, I would be like, oh man, I want to tell him to stop. But that would be, I don't want to say that to him, or I don't want to, he's going to think it's weird that I'm annoyed by this thing or whatever.
Right.
And then, a month later, you'd just be like, you'd snap on them and they'd be like, whoa, you're crazy. Right.
Right.
So in a way, because my brother and I fought out there, which which also, you know, the show, we gave them a lot of good arguing footage.
Oh yeah.
Because you set the cameras up and there's only so long you can like try to fake it, even if you know, pretend that you're not. So we capture this arguing footage, but they did lean into it a little bit more, right? Like one of the things I wish that they'd done is show, I made these cool paddles. So when you make a paddle, the blade can't be wider than the log that you have, right? So I whittled these two paddles, you know, using different techniques out of like a cedar this big, and people are like, oh, one of Jim's items was paddles, you know, because they look great. I'm like, oh man, never made the show, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't maybe fight as much as regularly as we showed,
right?
You know, but at the same time, for me, I think that was an interesting thing, because being out there with my brother also made us realize that, you know, nothing can really like break our experience and bond too, right?
Yeah,
you
my
know?
brother and I are a year and 10 days apart, and we're the same. You know, like we don't hold punches. Whatever. We've beat the shit out of each other since we can remember. You know, we don't hold back. But that's what allows us to be, you know, and it's the same with me and my friends, that like we've just always been that way. Like we don't hold it against each other, you know?
Right. You can get in a little argument here or there, difference of opinion, doesn't matter, you know?
An opinion's like an asshole. Everyone's got one.
That's the truth, especially nowadays, man.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's brutal. Like, and why can't we acceptance is key.
Yeah, you mentioned that as well.
Yeah, you can't change anybody.
Yeah.
You can't have anybody change you. We are who we are. So you have a choice. Do I accept this person and who they are and what they bring, or I don't, and I choose not to associate?
Right.
It doesn't mean you have to begrudge, belittle, or anything negative to that person. You just have to set yourself aside from that person. That's all.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're right. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean anything like that. It just means we're different and we're not compatible.
Yeah.
We're oil and water. Big deal. Move on.
Yeah. Not everyone's going to like you. You're not going to get like with anyone
Don't let
else.
it consume you. Don't let it bother you.
Yeah.
But don't put yourself in the position where it can.
Yeah. How important was that positive attitude when you're out there? Like, I remember when you woke up that one day and you said, this is going to be an amazing day. There's something, or you said there's something different about this day. And what happened was you went out there and you lost your lure, and I saw you're just like, oh, and then you kind of caught yourself and you're like, nope, I'm going to go do something else. And then guess what? Freaking Christmas Day. You know what I mean?
2 grouse, red squirrel, whitefish in the gill net.
Yeah.
And the whole day stayed calm. The water was still and it was calm.
Beautiful.
I wish I had shown my smoker, because I had the big pike out of my gill net that I hadn't finished smoking. Because if you notice, I really smoked my stuff up good, because Taz there, when he pulled, I went, dude, those are, oh man, I could tell
not
just
dry
by the color,
enough.
right?
Yeah, not dry enough.
You know, so, but I had that smoker and I got 2 grouse, a red squirrel, great big pike, beautiful lake trout, beautiful whitefish on it. And I'm just like, oh, this is smorgasbord heaven. I'm going to eat like a king tonight, you know?
Yeah, that looked awesome.
And then I sat there and had my Labrador tea and watching the sunset and the stars come out and the northern lights and just going, how blessed am I?
Yeah.
You know, and that amount of time with no materialism, no TV, no video game, no telephone, no nothing, and feeling that full and that alive and that good just shows you what we don't need, you know? And we need to regress back to a simpler life. And, you know, everybody's in a whole big hurry to go nowhere.
Right.
And, you know, we all worry about what we have and what have you, and we forget about what really matters. And, you know, I still get up on the weekends, and my boys are 21 and 23, and I'm making big breakfast and eggs Benedict and French toast and pancakes, and everybody's sitting around. We still have dinner together. You know, those are things that matter, and we talk about what they're, you know, because life is busy, and so you make time, you know, and even if it's something
prioritize,
simple, right? having dinner as a family, having breakfast as a, instead of just getting up and going and out the door and all the rest of it. Hunting and fishing is one of those things that I can do with my kids, and we're all happy in it.
Right.
And it's, I was never a bear hunter until many years later. But when turkey season came in, it was a whole different, because I was always a fall hunter. Now I'm going
Something
hunting
to do in the spring.
and watching the bush come to life rather than go to sleep for the winter. What a different experience.
Eating some trout lilies.
Right.
Yeah,
And
you're sitting there.
Exactly. A pile of leeks
Yeah,
and stuff. And, it was, and I love that. And, I've been able to share that with my wife and my boys and my family, my dad, my grandfather, my uncle, and those are the bonds that keep families family.
So what was it like, Wyatt, to catch a fish on a rod that you made with a lure that you made, but also in a situation where you really needed that fish because you're super hungry and potentially you could have won $500,000?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've been blessed growing up in the Muskokas and what have you, and I went fishing on every spare moment. Quagama Lake and Lake of Bays were just incredible lake trout lakes. I've caught more lake trout than I can imagine, more smallmouth bass, more speckled trout, more whitefish. I was out there on Reindeer Lake, and I had carved a rod and reel very similar to what Clay Hayes made. I basically stole Clay's design. He was my inspiration for that rod and reel, so thank you, Clay. And then I carved the lure, and there was a little bit of trial and error. And I was down there on my point, and I all of a sudden I get this fish on. And I've caught, like I say, just countless fish. And I got that fish in, and I felt like I was 4 years old again, catching my, I can't remember when I was so excited to catch a 3 or 4 pound lake trout as I was at that. Like every bit of it was just incredible. The fact that I'd made the rod, the fact that I'd made the reel, the fact that I'd made the lure, the fact that everything worked, and now I'm going to get to enjoy the rewards of my effort. And it solidified the fact that you have the right to be here. You are, because I laugh when they call me a survival expert, because I'm not.
Right.
I know how to survive. I know how to, but like when it comes to like Luke Olson and the way he could light a fire and his knowledge of so many things,
napping arrowheads,
exactly,
these kinds of things.
It's far beyond my level. But when it comes to hunting skills and fishing skills and stuff like that, I'm far above his
just
level.
toughing it out, right? That too.
And those are just things that make us all different. You take Mikey. Mikey lasted 55 days out there. That boy has never seen snow.
Right.
He grew up in Georgia, where right now you look outside here and it's white and the lakes are frozen, and he's standing down at home in a t-shirt.
Right. Totally different world.
He's never seen this.
Yeah.
And that dude out there freezing, I give that man a lot of credit.
Dude, that was tugged on the heartstrings. His last scene talking about his kid, especially somebody who myself is the father of a kid with special needs, and seeing him talk about that and his connection from it, man, I almost just, if I was out there and I knew that was going on, I probably just would have tapped out to let him win. I
said that on camera one night. I said, Mikey, I said, I got a feeling you're still out here with me. I said, but I don't know. And I said, if I had known it was just you and me out here, brother, I'd tap.
Yeah. I believe you would. I believe you would have. Yeah.
I love that man. He is that soul. And I'm not saying I would not like the 500 grand. That's an absolute bullshit story. But I don't need it like Mikey does.
Right.
And I'm good with not walking away with the 500 grand.
Yeah.
But the way that the world, the viewers of Alone and stuff stepped up. Luke started that GoFundMe page, and it was at 105,000 or something.
Mikey didn't even want to do it. He felt weird about it.
Yeah, because that's the type of man he is.
Right.
Mikey was in real bad shape when he came out because
how many days was he out there
55.
for? Yeah, so pretty close, really.
Yeah, and he felt that he had every skill in the world and he had a driving power, and he just couldn't make it work. He lost 90-some pounds out there. He's a beast.
90 pounds.
Yeah, he's a beast of a man.
God.
He's like 6'5" and about freaking 305 or something when he went in.
Wow. So he's like my height.
Oh yeah, he's a beast of a man.
Holy shit.
And and Nikolai, his son, Mikey said it the one day. He said, for all you parents out there that tell your kids, "Oh, just go be quiet," he says, "Don't do that." He says, "There's a lot of us parents out there that just love to hear our kids say a word."
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
that resonates a lot. And that's the one thing about the Alone family is that, as a rule, they're all good people. I've met a lot of them, not just from my season, but like yourself and like Clay and like Jordan, and the list goes on.
I wonder why.
Because of what we do. Nature and nurture go together, and we tend to be family. We tend to have that respect. We tend to think outside the box, and our lives aren't driven by materialism. And we view things very different than people who do. We know what it's like to procure our own food. We know what it's like to have knowledge walking into the bush. We don't walk into the bush like it's a foreign place. We go to the city and it's a foreign place, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. So we feel going to the city like a person from the city feels like coming up to the woods, and it's all good. But that it creates a different respect and a different personality. We're slower up here. We, if I don't get at it today, I'll get at it tomorrow type thing. It's, we're not, like I said, big rush to go nowhere. Well, we don't have that up here in the same mannerism that a lot of people do. And I think that plays a big part of it. And the show, they're casting for people that are going to resonate with the audience. Right. They want, like, that's the one thing. We were given an opportunity where people actually feel like they know us. Right. And for a large part, they do. Yeah. And we put our heart on a sleeve out there, and, nobody wants to go cry in front of 43 million people or whatever is watching.
That's not the first plan on the list when you head out. Yeah.
But we expose ourselves to everything, and we allow the world to. And the sad part is people make opinions. Like people went on a lot about Mikey and his other children, and Mikey talked all about his other children. I know that. I was listening to it. They had almost 600 hours of Mikey on film. They're going to break that down into
how many stories can they possibly tell? They have time to tell one story with a couple side plots, and so they can't focus on everything, or you just have a bunch of jumbled stuff.
Exactly. And the one that resonated the most with people was his autistic son. Yeah. And it's what resonates the most with him. That son of his is like that is his pride. That is his reason for everything he does. Look at what the awareness that was raised for autism, the generosity of people. There was people that were donating $5. That person that donated $5, that was probably like somebody giving $1,000 because they don't have the money. Right. But they still felt that was a worthy enough cause to sacrifice something on their own to make somebody else's life better. And there's a lot of people in this world that are that way. And we need a lot more. But that's what Alone does. It creates positivity and good vibes. I think so. And peace.
I think, absolutely. Like some of the stuff that you're saying is putting good stuff out there into the world. And I think as somebody that has spent a lot of time in the bush, you know to think positive, and then you kind of take that back in your life, and that comes through when you're talking to your friends, when you're meeting people, and these kinds of things. Well, geez, if I give up, if I stop hunting today, we're not gonna get anything. You know that if you just keep at it, eventually, probably it's gonna come through. That if you just keep staying out there, you know what? How many rainy days in a row are we going to have? It's going to get sunny before too long, or this storm will break.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And maybe that's where it comes from when you have time in the bush. And I think also just getting exercise. Everybody feels good after they get some exercise, after they play a sport, after they go for a jog, whatever. Everybody feels good when they're in the bush too. Mix those two together, and guess what? You're pretty freaking happy,
fresh air, and they're just, and simple things like how much better things taste, and how much better you sleep.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like, when you've worked that hard, you're full of fresh air, and everything's been good, and then you lay your head down, and man, you can just, and then when you wake up, you're up. Yeah. It's not like you're hitting their snooze for you get up.
Right.
And that's that life breathes life into your soul. Like, we live off of energy, and Mother Nature provides us that energy. Things like grounding and stuff, it proves that the ground will heal and draw toxins and stuff out of your body.
Interesting.
There's so many things, going and jumping in ice water,
right?
What it does for people don't realize the simple thing. Dandelions, one of the biggest companies, I forget the name of them, that starts with an M, one of the big pharma drug companies, They also own Roundup, because they want to kill every
Monsanto or something.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. Sounds like an evil dictator.
They are.
It? Yeah. The name Monsanto sounds like literally some warlord or evil person.
Right. Yeah? There's so many natural healing agents in our woods out there, and not just here, all over the world. We were talking about cannabinoids from or CBDs from marijuana. We were talking about how many other plants, our bodies have cannabinoid receptors. It's big pharma and companies that they see the values, but those values
not going to make a dime off of it.
Right.
When you could just make that medicine yourself.
Exactly.
Why are they going to put money into the reason? They're going to lose money. Even if they're great people, they're not going to be in business to lose the shareholders' money, right? It's kind of common sense.
Rose hip tea.
Yeah.
Things like that. The mint you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that stuff's great for giardia. Yeah.
And ginger for
What'd you call me? Just kidding.
And Rogers.
Yeah.
Are you old enough to know who Ginger Rogers was?
A little bit, but
Fred
I'm not.
Astaire
I'm not an expert on it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Hey, I saw something there showing these millennials that don't know what a VCR is.
I know, right?
I'm like, oh my god, man.
My wife went and found a VCR. She wanted to buy one and couldn't buy one anywhere. Yeah. But we've got a bunch of old mini tapes from when our kids were growing up. We had one of those old camcorders, right?
Yeah.
And we had the VCR cassette that you pop it into the tape and then you put it in a VCR.
Yeah.
Well, she went everywhere to try and find a VCR. She phones my mother and says, Pat, you wouldn't have them. She says, I got 4 of them. And figured she had 4 VCRs stuck in her storage because she knew someday somebody was going to need a VCR.
I went into a store. I was actually looking for this table. And because I wanted to buy a cheap table for this, and I went into this antique store, and I found the exact phone that I had in my house when I was a kid. I'm like, oh shit, man, I'm old.
Right?
That's it. Yeah, so one of the this. I'm like, man, this is in an antique store now. No, you know.
I moved away from New Lowell when I was 9 years old. 9 years old.
Yeah.
424-1001 was my phone number back then, because when you were at a buddy's or something and you had to phone home.
Yeah. It was more fun though, I found.
Right? And then you screw up.
Yeah.
I got to start off.
It takes another hour, Yeah.
Yeah, but that gave you your memory to remember that phone number, and like I was in kindergarten and walked to school every day.
Right. Oh my, crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
You try and let your kid do that.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're a bad parent. You know, like what the hell?
Yeah, I thought my parents were so paranoid when I was a kid. And then I'm looking back at family videos and they're like embarrassed that they're letting us do the things that we're doing in the video. And they're like, well, you didn't actually need a boating license when you were that age. There was no boating licenses back then, you know. And I'm looking at my cousin's kids who are, great people. So I'm about to throw them under the bus. Couldn't even start the boat motor and put it in the water, or when they're double my age, when I'm out there freaking taking my brother, water skiing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it's just the newer generation or just more of a bubble wrap thing, or there really are more dangers that we can't teach kids as much. But
my dad was that way.
Yeah.
That if you were old enough to start the snowmobile, or big enough to start the snowmobile,
right,
or the boat motor, then you could drive it.
Right.
If you couldn't start it, you couldn't take it, because if something happened, you wouldn't be able to start it.
Right. Yeah.
But as soon as you were old enough that you could pull that snowmobile and start it, go ahead.
Then you knew you're going to be okay.
Yeah, 10 years old.
Yeah.
And my brother and I'd have the Beagle and a pair of 22s on, and we'd be driving over to McGuire's Bush to go rabbit hunting.
That's awesome,
and,
man.
Neither of us had a gun license. Neither of us had a snowmobile license. But that was the way life was.
Right.
I talk about respect, and we talk about guns and stuff now. My grandfather, and he's dead now, so nobody's going to give. But when we went to his house, he had 9 children, 27 grandchildren, 225-acre farm. When you walked in the front door of the old farmhouse, behind the door was a loaded gun.
Right.
When you went to the back door, was a loaded gun.
Right.
When you went to the garage, behind each door, there was a loaded gun.
Right.
When you went to the barn, behind each door was a loaded gun.
Yeah.
Not one accident.
Right.
And every one of us knew how to use it.
Right.
Every one of us knew not to touch it.
Right.
Everyone knew the consequences if you did.
Right.
And there was that respect for.
Right.
We didn't do the stupid things.
Right.
That you learned every gun you treat like it's loaded. That all come through with time. And, and Christ, now we were. Pocket knife.
Right.
I can remember at 5 years old, I had a pocket knife and would be out there cutting wood. Now kids that are 12 and 13-year-olds go, oh my, I gotta ask my mom.
Right. I did stab myself pretty good with my pocket knife twice. Yeah.
And then you learn, don't do
and
that.
And then my dad would get mad at me. So I don't even want. I'm like covering. I'm like you covering up the injury. I mean, what's all that blood, Jim? I'm like nothing. Like I was trying to make an arrow one time, and I was holding the stick like this, and I was pushing down, and it wasn't going. All of a sudden, it went right in there.
Right.
And then we're like a 5K boat ride from the road, 45-minute drive to town at the time. Right. I got in trouble. Now I'm bleeding and in trouble. Right. But I didn't do it again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we all lived. We got a few scars to prove it. That's okay. It's kind of like hockey.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There we go.
Let somebody shoot a hard pocket swing sticks at us on blades on our feet.
It's a good metaphor, man. I like that. Yeah. I get that too now that I have these younger kids, and I'm like you're saying, so you get some comments in that from the show that are just like out of touch. Man, try taking your kids out there, or even your freaking dog, and putting it on YouTube. Man, the kind of opinions people have, they think that like your dog should be perfectly comfy beside a warm fire and never have to do anything that it didn't want to do ever. And like the same thing with your kid, right? And people take for granted how dangerous the things that they do in their day-to-day lives are. Driving a car from point A to point B on the highway, you have a 1 in 60,000 chance of getting murdered.
Right.
Yet there's been 4 people have died from bear attacks. 4 or 6, let's say maybe 6 people in 4 bear attacks have died in the last 100 years in Ontario.
Right.
But yet everyone's like, there's bears in the woods. You're taking your kids out there. You know what I mean? I'm like, they're safer here than at home. I would say if you know what I know,
the biggest fear in the world is the fear of the unknown.
Right.
And when you break down fear, FEAR, false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
And most people don't know what they're afraid of.
Right.
And it's one of those things where we spend so much time on ignorance.
Right.
People have so many opinions that are based on ignorance and not facts.
Right.
They, like you talk with the dogs. Well, if you go out to Alaska and you've got a whole bunch of huskies sleeping under a foot of snow, you might walk out of your apartment, house, whatever in the morning. And then all of a sudden you'll see 12 huskies rise up out of the snow and give themselves a shake off.
Mm-hmm.
Those huskies get fed once every 4 to 5 days.
Right.
Oh my God, that's so.
Yeah.
Well, those dogs have a purpose and they're going to be running sleds, and we can't carry enough food to feed that whole tray of sled dogs.
Right.
And by you going and thinking you're doing it a favor and throwing it a meal every day behind my back, you're killing that dog.
Right, potentially. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and also the you have to understand the breed of that dog too. Like they're just
a wolf.
You know, yeah, it's like I get comments because I've done some trips where I have my dog walking beside me in the winter, you know, and I'm up on, you know, I was up on Baffin Island. I did a big trek there, and people are like, "Where are his boots?" I'm like, "Well, you know, the dog's boots, like I explained, like the circulation, the arteries and veins touch, and the boots are really more meant for when they're on abrasive snow and the snow is really soft.
We're throwing on our sidewalk.
Well, what about snow blindness?" I'm like, do the wolves get snow blindness? You know what I mean? Are the caribou getting snow blindness? So I think some, you know, southern breeds of dog, not near as easy as we could get it. But like my husky Malamute is going on a 8-hour walk a day towing sleds in the snow. This is like the thing that all the city huskies just dream about being my dog.
Right. All the
this dog is
watching mine going driving into a dirty old loon shit pond to go pick up a duck. They're going, "Oh, pick me."
Yeah, man. Yeah. And like I remember getting stuck in a blizzard one time and my dog's like drifted over. He was like comfortably sleeping. I was like, they don't sweat. I'm like, I gotta get my tent up, and if I can't get my tent up, I'm gonna die. And my dog's just like, I accidentally couldn't see him. I accidentally kind of kicked him a bit, and he just lifted his head up. Like, "What are you doing? Stop bothering me," right?
Yeah, right.
You know, but people kind of we're sort of we become out of touch with a lot of this stuff, you know. And I guess having the experience like you're on alone gets you to really kind of reframe things, get back to what's important. It also made me kind of look at society almost in a different way because of the food, because of being so hungry, just being like, my God, the infrastructure to get all this food to the stores, and the fact that any of that even works is amazing. You know,
you take common sense too.
Yeah.
We've got every apartment building, condominium, high rise in every major city in North America.
Yeah.
We've proven that gardens on the top of them are beneficial for conservation of heat, keeping them cool.
Yeah.
So it's better for the air conditioning. It's better for the heat, all the rest of it. If we took every one of those apartments / condominiums, all those elderly people that are sitting there with nothing to do, thumb up the ass, watching Archie Bunker or Jerry Springer or whatever the hell they're watching. Whereas if we could put a community garden up on every roof of that, we're saving on the heat, we're saving on the cooling, we're providing oxygen to the air. We provide a sense of community. It wouldn't be you'd have to pay somebody. They'd all be up there more than willing to weed that garden, make a fresh salad every night, share, get to know their neighbors. It's a win-win-win. Do we do it?
No.
You know, it's the same with so many things. There's so many little things that we could do. The fact that we sell a coffee, a soda pop in a container from McDonald's, from Tim Hortons, is asinine. We should not be allowed to do it. How hard is it? I've got a travel cup in my truck. It's always there. I go to Tim Hortons, I got my own cup. I want a large coffee. You should have to pay $1 for that cup. It wouldn't take people long to realize that, if I don't take my cup, it's going to cost me $1.
Problem solved, basically.
Exactly. Think about all the trees we're killing. Think about all the recycling that we're having to do. Think about all the waste that we're doing because of that. Think about a head of lettuce, a package of peppers, bag of carrots. Okay, all those things. We're putting them into packages. For what? Nothing more than labeling and to sell more.
And where is that packaging? Where's the plastic? And where did it even come from? It's like an oil product. You know, the levels of manufacturing and everything, and the fossil fuels burn, and the mining and the pollution to the earth just to wrap a piece of lettuce.
Look at that Project Oceans with the two guys that started going and pulling, millions and millions of tons of plastics they're pulling out of our oceans because we're disgusting.
Yeah.
We really are. The albatross.
Right.
They breed on an island stuck out in the middle of nowhere on the
amazing
seas.
birds.
And
Huge.
their young are dying from the intake of their parents are feeding them plastic because they're having to clear plastic off their beaches because they're right on that natural current system that all the shit we're throwing in the oceans and that are piling up on there. You know, that's how bad we are. You know, we here in North America, we're sending our tires and stuff to other countries where they light them on fire because it's illegal for us to do here.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
yeah. And
like,
now they're going to tax wood pizza oven restaurants.
Yeah,
because their carbon footprint.
Right. Like, what the hell is wrong with us?
Yeah.
You know, there's so many good ideas that could be made great ideas. It was a Polish company. I can't remember the name of it, but when they started taking all these Aguilarts or whatever they call them, the Russian rich guys with all their great big super yachts and what have you. So this Polish company, the whole hull is devised out of solar panels. You can go up with a sledgehammer and hit these. You can't break them, right? The whole ship is run on them and 2 wind turbines. And we're talking like 400-foot super yachts, you know, like, and they're running everything off of them.
That's awesome.
Completely solar.
Hopefully that's the future.
Every new high rise that we build in North America should be made to have 50% of that glass that's used as those solar panels. So that is a window, that's a solar panel. That's a window, that's a solar panel. And just reverse them, 50%. We could run all those buildings on green energy just by doing that.
Cool.
But nobody will do it.
Yeah, I know. Is this, when you were out there alone, were you thinking about this kind of stuff?
Constantly.
Yeah, me too, man.
Yeah.
I just felt like you got this clarity. You remember before when you were talking about how it's really hard to explain a feeling?
Yeah.
Some of those things, when you get that clarity, it comes from lack of food or like fasting. A lot of people say they get clarity from fasting, just from being in the bush, being there with your thoughts, doing these kind of routines. You kind of, common sense starts to reveal itself to you in a lot of ways. And one of the things that I was explaining is like, oh my God, the infrastructure to get all this food into the stores is like so much. I started to realize it and step back. And then you realize what I was talking about, how, you know, you only have so much time to build projects every day. You look in the survival books and there's like 20 different shelters. And you're like, maybe I'll build that one. Maybe I'll build one of those. And it's like, okay, I have time to build one of these things because I got to be also getting food. And then you start to realize the whole thing about how people went from, once we started farming, all of a sudden people had all this other time to do things. I'm like, man, did I ever learn that lesson out there? Right. And, but it's, you read things 100 times in books, you know, it's like what you're saying, how you learn from doing. You get a understanding that's deeper than what words can explain from doing this kind of things through the feelings. And that's a way that I can best explain, and I guess it's a cop-out because I'm not explaining it, some of those experiences I had out there.
Well, and you know, it's like you were talking about with my rod and reel and lure. It's that sense of personal accomplishment.
Right. Yeah.
You know, we take pride in what we do. And when, like, the cabin you and your brother built was beautiful, right?
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. No, we built, our shelter was not impressive.
Right. No, it was the
Brooke and Dave.
You're right.
Yeah. I'm going to have them on the show in the spring, by the way. They're going to come in here.
Nice. Yeah. No, that cabin. Yeah. Things like that. You know, the one Jody and Lee built and what, great things. Like, you know, when you do those things, you have a sense of pride, a sense of accomplishment.
You could see Lee had that.
Oh, yeah. Both Lee is one of the most awesome individuals that you will ever meet in this world. He's truly that guy. Yeah. Every one of us said that. And Lee, if you're watching, he's got great taste in music.
Nice.
Right. He's an awesome dude.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. No, I love everything about the whole Alone experience.
Yeah. Yeah, me too, man. It was, I'm not going to lie. It was hard. And I was explaining to you some of the crazy kind of expeditions. So that's sort of more of my background. And, you know, I remember being in the middle of Arctic Quebec doing this solo winter crossing, stuck in a blizzard. You know, was I in more danger, you know, than alone? Was, you know, more scared? Yeah, I was in more danger than anybody you see on survival shows for sure. But the mental challenge of alone, not knowing when it's going to end. And in the later days, which, you know, we both made it well into, man, those are the days, man, that they test your metal, man. You know what I mean? And you know, through that, you can learn that you can do a lot more than you think.
Have you ever applied for it as an individual on going on a loan, or did you just apply the one season?
I originally did apply for a loan for one season, but they weren't talking about doing two people in the following season. So all of a sudden, they were asking me for this sizzle reel, and I gave them something that my brother was also in, and they're like, "We want your brother too." And I was like, weird, but they weren't really explaining to me exactly why.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to sign this contract. I went off and I did that crazy Arctic Quebec trek, and I came back and my brother's like, all right, let's go on a loan. I'm like, I just been alone. Like, I'm just like, no, you know what I mean? But then some time went by and they're like, hey, we're doing two people. They started, they told us what was up. And, I'm like, all right, let's do this. Me and my wife went up to Northern Saskatchewan that same year and did a 2-week canoe trip down the Porcupine River, which is one of the things that I thought was so cool about watching your experience on Reindeer Lake, because I'd spent time in that country
area,
and loved it. You know what I mean?
Oh, it is beautiful, and so vast. Like there's nothing, man.
Nothing.
Like, we went into La Ronge and then we drove down the Churchill River trading post. And then flew.
That's a cool store.
It is ever. Yeah. And then flew a couple hours. It was an hour and a half flight or something. Yeah. Over nothing. Right. Like they're not a and then we hit Arctic Lodges and that lake's 245 kilometers long, and there's only a couple of places on it.
Most remote season of alone ever that you are. That's now, you think, okay, the Arctic, isn't that more remote? Some places are, but where they did alone the Arctic, you could drive a boat there from Yellowknife. There was a lodge. It's still extremely remote, but as far as really far flung, I understand you guys had the most remote spot.
Yeah, that's what they said. It was wild.
Which is challenging when you're out there, because there's more that you don't see before launch, more travel, more getting to where you're getting to. And then on the other side too, it's like, I actually work behind the scenes a bit with the season up on Great Slave Lake, just to hang out with people that had tapped, and they tapped and they're just like, oh man, I'm still in it. Like, I'm just at a lodge with no heat on Great Slave Lake. Right. They felt like, whereas some of the other seasons when you tap, you go back to like a town, you know what I mean? So you were kind of dealing with that too.
Yeah. Well, we stayed at Arctic Lodges. I think Alan and I was there 11 days. Alan was there 9, I think. Yeah. There was, and because it was so remote. Yeah. I wasn't allowed to leave because Alan and I were the last two. Right. I wasn't allowed to leave till they were going to let him leave. Right. And vice versa.
Yeah. They upped the aftercare time because, for health reasons and whatnot, they don't just say, see you later, go home. They make you the
stick
full
around. Refeeding program is, and that is determined on how long a time you're there. Right. And I got to give them credit. They do look after you extremely well. Yeah. I give them, I have nothing negative. And the food, the ladies that were in the kitchen were awesome. That bone broth was, they serve you.
We didn't get bone broth. Now, okay. So so my season went over freaking Christmas and New Year's, and, which was tough. Right. When we got out, all they had was vegan soup for us. And we left these gunnel fish at camp. And we're like, we should have brought the gunnel fish with us because we were eating more when we're out there. Right. So we had to make a stink about it. And I think the crew was also just like, oh man, we just they were kind of ready to get out of here. So maybe they were having their wrap up party and they didn't want to hear about it from us. So we complained okay, give them some grapes. And they made good with it. Right. But me and my brother were a little pissed, that we just had vegan soup. Right.
Oh yeah, my first meal was 5 dried apricots and 10 almonds. Right. With a thing of bone broth. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm ready to eat you. And you're
because you're
Dave
dreaming.
Holder's a little guy. I can just carry him, eat his arm like a chicken wing.
And cannibalism it's going to be for dinner, Dave.
He's a great guy.
Here's a Snickers. Oh, he is. He's a beauty. Me and Tori went to hang out with him and Brenda, his wife, at their place in Alberta, which is a beautiful property, a ranch pretty much.
Yeah, right? he was showing me some pictures of it and what have you. His wife, Brenda, she made the pemmican for anybody. And I
use her pemmican recipe too, actually.
It was. I won't say delicious. It was.
Have you tried making it with wild blueberries? With not even wild, but just unfrozen blueberries?
No.
Game changer.
Yeah.
Game changer. Once you use the frozen blueberries, obviously wild would be better, but it's more expensive. But if you do fresh blueberries, man, it's like the aftertaste is like a fruit roll up, and it's like sweet.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
by far the best I've ever done.
One time, my buddy Joe and my dad and another guy named Lynn Smith, we were up in Thunder Bay moose hunting.
Yeah.
And it was late season. And all the berries had freeze dried onto the plants. I don't know if you ever had it, but I picked a bunch of them because that's all that was there to make blueberry pancakes, and I knew they'd rehydrate.
Yeah.
I can't describe how good those, and it's like ice wine.
Nice. Yeah.
All the sugars condensed into those blueberries.
Yeah.
And they puffed right up like a normal blueberry in the pancake and what have you. And the sweetness and what have you, they were hands down the best blueberry pancakes I've ever eaten in my life.
Yeah, I could see that being different though than just grabbing a frozen bag of blueberries from the grocery store. Though.
Exactly. These are freeze dried on the plant.
Yeah.
It's like ice wine. They
Right.
let the grapes.
Yeah, it's like more expensive and fancier.
Well, and
sweeter.
It increases the sugar content right through the roof.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with them drying on the plant. And any chance I get that opportunity again, I will be
I'm
doing
going
it.
to try that, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to even fake it, get some blueberries, kind of freeze them for a bit
Yeah.
and throw them in. Did you have any food dreams while you're out there in the later days?
I don't even know if I had any dreams.
No? Yeah.
I'm not one to remember dreams.
Yeah.
Just, it's very rare that I get that. So I don't know. I really don't know. I certainly don't remember having any food dreams, but I had lots of food thoughts while I was
had a
sitting
dream
there.
that I shot a moose, and I woke up like, no, you know what I mean? And then I had a dream that I was going to make Reese's Pieces pancakes. So pancakes with Reese's Pieces. I was just like eating them. I never heard of this before in my life. So when I got home and I was well enough, I pounded me a good hearty stack of Reese's Pieces pancakes.
And how were they?
They're very, very good.
I bet.
Highly recommend giving them a shot.
Yeah, chocolate chip pancake.
Probably not the healthiest.
No,
But,
Yeah. That's like my youngest son's girlfriend. She made a peanut butter cheesecake for his birthday there on January 3rd. Oh my God, was it good? And she made an Oreo crust instead of the graham crust and took Oreo cookies and crushed them all up. Man, what a great cheesecake.
You ever do maple syrup, maple sugar?
I make
at
it
home?
every spring.
Oh, do it? Yeah, us too. I love it.
Since my boys were basically old enough to walk, we've been making maple syrup. A buddy of mine, Dan, he made a 3x3 stainless pan. I still do mine on an open wood fire.
Cinder
I
blocks?
like that smoky. My dad welded me up a little frame and put some metal sides on it.
Yeah. It's the best. Yeah, we go barrel stove. How many trees do you tap?
I only tap like 20 to 25 traps.
Yeah, about the same. I think we're doing like 30. We have the hill here though, so we actually use the tubes, guide it all into a big cistern.
I got snowshoes and 5-gallon buckets.
Yeah, that's fun. That's more honest. And then the other ones we snowshoe around, and then we started doing the boil downs on the driveway though, so we still got to carry it up the hill just because it's easier to manage with the kids and just out there. And I put a wall tent sometimes up on the driveway so we have a warm place, and super fun. By the end of the boil down season, I'm a little over it, but
I like the dark syrup, so I start a little later.
And
I'm not worried about getting so much syrup. Like I do, usually if I do 3 to 5 gallons, I'm more than happy. That does me all mine and gives me a jar to give to my uncle and my aunt or whoever I feel.
And that's the best because people love that gift, man.
Right?
It's like, could you give someone a better gift?
Like that's what we do all the time now because we're all. If we have some or need something, we go buy it, So when it comes to like Christmas, and I had an old Greek, my mother loves baklava, depends how you say it. This elderly Greek lady in Bracebridge, she makes the most incredible baklava that you've ever eaten in life. And it's just saturated with honey.
That crust is kind of crunchy and crispy. And it's like a pastry that's sweet.
Layers of phyllo. My mother, so gave her a tray of that. Some maple syrup, some bottle of wine. A few because that's stuff they'll use. Right. And,
absolutely.
My one son's girlfriend's mother, she's Italian. She homemade biscotti and almond cooking, sends us up a whole.
Nice.
That's a perfect gift. You know?
It really is.
And you don't need money, you know?
No.
And
the best things in life are free, they say.
Pretty much, right?
Well, me and Tori were thinking about getting chickens, and then it's tough because we travel. But my neighbor's got more eggs than he knows what to do with. Hired his son to his neighborhood job is to drive around on his quad and deliver eggs for $5 a dozen.
Right.
You know what I mean? Sometimes we do a little barter if we have some fish or some maple syrup or whatever. And it's just kind of fun to sort of be a little bit to share like that and be a bit of a community as well and get these really good fresh eggs and real maple syrup. And it's kind of funny that that's like special, that just feeding ourselves and sharing is like different nowadays.
Exactly.
It's kind of crazy, but it is awesome.
The world needs more of it. And, you know, I can remember doing that as a kid. My grandfather would have extra tomatoes and extra cucumbers and he'd take them down to the 3 or 4 neighbors, and then they'd bring them extra potatoes and extra beets and whatever they had, and everybody shared. Now we hardly know who our neighbors are.
No, I know. It's weird. It's weird. I got, actually, just around here, there's a mix of people that are cottagers and people that live here full time. And I used to go somewhere else to deer hunt, and this year, getting back there, asking around, meeting the people. And you know how people get with deer hunting on other people's crown land areas, and it's like gang territory, right? Ended up just making a bunch of new friends, coming up with something that worked well for everybody. Stay in touch with these people. I'm like, this guy's been down the road for me for 7 freaking years and never even, never talk to him. It's weird. I guess and we're both deer hunters.
Right.
He ended up probably pushing the buck to us anyways by accident.
Right. And it's, and it's the same thing we talk about respect.
Yeah.
I don't want people on my and that's why I hunt private land.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that I've known a long time.
Yeah.
His 2 sons were gonna hunt an area. It's a big chunk of crown land.
Yeah.
And Paul got in touch with me. Hey, Wyatt, my boys want to go and hunt in at this certain spot. We know you've hunted there. This is where they're going to be hunting. Is that going to impose on you? And nope, we're all good.
Right.
And that's just a simple respect thing.
Right.
And there's lots of bush out there.
Yeah.
And just
some people just don't
crown.
know. It's again, you're talking about people that just litter, that just don't know, that are just starting, and they go in there, and next thing you know, they set up on right under somebody's stand where they've like planned and built it and just ruin it for the next guy. Like you see that stuff happening too.
You go out on opening day of gun season and you hear boom, 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 boom. What the hell are you shooting at?
Right.
And when you give somebody, I'm going to use the term shitty for these guys that pick up a gun 1 or 2 weeks of the whole year and then go out and shoot deer. Well, that's not fair to the deer.
No, and their scopes are probably off. And
they just don't even know what they're doing. In Norway, if you shoot a big game animal, you take it to an inspection station and they inspect the wound. And if you have not made a perfect clean kill, they're going to say, what's this other hole here? What's it? And if you have 2 mistakes, they pull your license.
Interesting.
And that's showing a respect for the sport you're doing.
Right.
We're not these guys that are out there and it's brown. And I was one of those guys. When I grew up, if it's brown, it's down, and I'd be hanging
blasting at everything.
I haven't shot a big game animal with a gun since 2006.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah.
And it's not that I have anything against gun hunting. My dad still gun hunts, and but even if you're going with a gun, show the animal enough courtesy and respect to do it with 1 shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a ridiculous thing that you hear people, mostly non-hunters. Well, you should hunt with a gun rather than a bow because it dies more humanely. It's like, really, what would you rather be hunted with?
Right.
The odds on you getting shot with a bow are like 10 times less.
Right.
You know what I mean? Than a rifle.
I know if somebody shoots me with a bow, they're shooting at me.
Right.
A gun it could be from a guy a mile away.
Yeah. And also, unfortunately, hunting injuries that are accidental shootings with a bow actually result in death more often than with a gun because of just bleeding.
Oh,
it creates more blood. So
if you know what lactic acid is, like if somebody goes and pushes a deer or runs a deer with a dog or whatever, and it's shot under stress,
right?
And then you take one that walks under a tree stand, gets shot by an arrow that nobody's ever seen. That deer's never known that hunter was there. It's just all of a sudden an arrow goes sizzling through him, and he dies.
Yeah,
I will show you which is which just by looking at the color of the meat.
Nice.
And anybody that's an experienced butcher or whatever, and it's lactic acid, and it's what's released because of adrenaline, okay, and it makes your animals taste bad. And
I've heard some people say, well, bow hunting, because the animal runs so far after the kill that it could create it to not taste as good. I haven't personally found that, but
a deer shot with a bow cleanly
yeah,
will not run any further than a gun.
right.
Okay, if you take a deer and you shoot it through the lungs, double lung,
What's
with
the
a
difference?
30-06,
Right.
and then you shoot it with an arrow, it's probably going to die quicker with the arrow because it's going to bleed out quicker.
Yeah.
You shoot him with a gun, punch it through the shoulder, you're just going to watch it lay there and kick. It's just not going to run. It's still going to exhaust the same amount of energy and all the rest of it. That's not shot with a bow. You ever seen a deer or a moose shot with a bow and just stand there and not know what's happened?
Can't say I have.
Yeah. I've shot, I don't know, 30, 35 deer with a bow. And I've seen numerous of them stand. I remember the one moose I shot, my son Evan and I were standing there, and I put an arrow right through both lungs. He ran, I grunted at him, he stopped. The sun's just coming up, and he stood there, and he's looking right at me, and I'm telling him, don't move. And he stood there for maybe 10, 15 seconds, and then he started going like this. And then he fell right over. That was the easiest. We had walked, and we got out of the truck, and we heard two bulls fighting. And we went around, got on the downside wind. I thought get up, figure I'm just going to hit the paddle, and these two bulls are going to come charging right out at me. Well, they skirting out around. As soon as I gave that rattle, they quit. They were just done. And then I noticed them skirting around. I said, Joe, they're heading between the cut and the lake. Let's go. And we start going. I'm spraying my urine and all the rest of it everywhere. And Joe, I said, you get down in the swath. And I said, I'll stand outside and call. I just start calling with my son there. And I look around, and Christ, there's one following us. And I had just crossed the skid road. I was about 100 yards off it type thing. This thing was 42 yards away from me. I quilled him. He ran straight back. I grunted while he was right beside that road, and he stood there watching in the sun, and he fell over. He was 10 feet off the side of the skid road. I told Joe, you go get the trailer and the truck. Evan and I will get this thing field dressed. We got it field dressed, unhooked the trailer, put a rope on it, yanked it up onto the road, winched it onto the truck. We were back at camp at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I wish every moose could.
When does it ever work out like that? This one I had to carry down from the top of like a 1,200-foot mountain, bushwhack through swamps, like on the other side of a lake. You know what I mean? Like,
and smiled the whole way doing it.
Though, it was awesome. Right? It was, like we said, you plan for it. You're ready to do that. You know what I mean? It's part of the adventure. It's part of like fair chase.
That's it. My hunting sack goes with 2 sets of cheesecloth hunting bag, big game bags. One that I'm going to drag them out with, and if it happens to get dirty, I got another set that when I get to camp and hang up the quarters, I'm going to put a fresh bag on them to keep that all nice and clean.
Were you bummed with all this hunting and bow hunting experience that you didn't get a chance? I remember you on the show saying like, I thought I'd be out here moose hunting, and then you're having to kind of switch it up and go more for small game with the bow and go more for fish.
I was still moose hunting. I just wasn't successful.
Right. Yeah, you're constantly.
But I was totally bummed that I was like going to that area and what I'd researched. I was just, there's going to be a moose behind every tree, type thing. And with my calling abilities and knowing, I thought for sure that I'm going to be able to call one. And not if I couldn't believe it.
No, where I was in near Black Lake. The same thing. We saw a couple black bear, but we were told that there weren't a ton of moose just right around there. Like there still were moose, but it wasn't loaded like in some other areas. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I just kind of guessed after watching your show that it might have been similar down there. Like there's for sure moose in the area, but it's maybe not as loaded as some people might think it is.
Right. That's the one thing I loved about like the Horn Plain area. The year that Aaron shot the first moose we'd ever shot with a bow. The first moose we'd ever shot at. Nice. Another statement we'd seen lot. That year, it was the 22nd moose that we'd seen.
Wow.
That he finally put an arrow in. And lots were cows and calves, and we only hunt bulls. We never apply for a cow tag or anything like that. We're just not that way. And hunting with a bow, you're lucky to shoot a cow.
Because you can't really call them at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Wyatt, hey man, I think it's just been awesome to have you here. Is there anything you want to say? Any words of wisdom that you'd maybe say to younger kids that are looking at learning how to hunt, that are looking at learning to get into the outdoors, and might one day aspire to be at your level?
Don't ever underestimate your ability, and always be open to trying something new. If you don't try it, you'll never know truly whether you enjoy it or not. So, give yourself that opportunity to maybe do something that is rewarding, both nutritionally, spiritually, mentally, and can help a lot of others, and when we're talking about conservation, some of the best conservationists in this world are the hunters. They're the ones that are out there actively doing things. Same with the fishermen. So, the next time you want to throw criticism out there about what we do, and you're out there looking at a wild turkey in Ontario, or you're looking at an elk in Ontario, thank the hunters that brought them back into this area and have been the pioneers of the reintroduction program and stuff. And, like I said, knowledge is bliss. Base your opinions on knowledge, not in ignorance.
Absolutely, man. Well said. Well, thanks, man.
It's been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
No problem, man.